Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is Spiderman Remastered on Ultimate Difficulty, with no upgrades, no abilities, no gadgets, and, well, pretty much nothing. And it's going to be a very concise project, ladies and gentlemen. We're playing on the PC, the recent port, and I will be trimming out everything that is unessential to the point of this project, which is to showcase Spider-Man getting stuck in and doing his best to circumvent all of these difficulties. And this is the second Spider-Man project I've made. It's a bit of a record for me, actually. It's the first time I've done 2 no damage runs for the same game. I don't usually do that. However, this game is quite interesting because when it came out, it had a difficulty called, I think it was Spectacular. And then later on they released a new difficulty for it. And at the time I asked my community if they wanted to see it. And I think people were a little bit burned out on Spider-Man and they didn't really care too much, so I didn't end up covering it. And I didn't actually play it at all. And I was waiting for the PC port, and then it finally came out, and then here we are. But one thing you will notice is this difficulty is legit. They've changed some things that really affect the flow of how you play. And a couple of things to bear in mind in this project as well. My playstyle is going to change the more we play here, guys, because I was a little bit, shall we say, rusty for this game. I was midway through a playthrough on normal, and on normal you can like hit a person with a web once and they pretty much get completely immobilized. And the first thing you learn on this difficulty is that does not happen at all here. So a lot of my playstyle was kind of developed as I was recording this, because I managed to beat the game on stream to kind of refresh myself a little bit. I was still feeling a bit sluggish, a bit unresponsive. And then the more you play, especially when you go for no damage here and no upgrades, you realise that you have to fight these guys for a lot. And the reason for this is the web shooter, which is the only gadget I will be using because it's the gadget that you start with. And they have nerfed it into the ground on this difficulty to make it a little bit more tricky for you. So, as you can see in the top left there, you get 6 web shots, and if you hit somebody with all 6 of them, you might web them. But most of the time you won't. And because you might have used 1 or 2 before that, or maybe the guy wasn't weak enough, or he wasn't in a situation where he was vulnerable enough. So what it leads to is, it leads to moments of, if you want to web immobilize a goon, you have to commit to using everything on that one guy. And then there's probably 5 or 6 other guys there who are about to come and try and punch you. And you might notice here that this initial fight seems like it's taking forever, and it is. Because you don't have the tools to circumvent people unless you play in a very specific and very boring playstyle, which I will be doing a little bit of that in this project, but one of my goals was to make, hopefully, the footage exciting to watch. But if you want to come through here and whoop them up a big storm, get rid of them really quick, the best way to do it is to launch them, web them in midair, and then slam them into the ground. It is the safest and most consistent way of getting rid of people, and because you are in the air, you are almost completely immune to any kind of reprisal. But there goes the first fight there, guys, and then we move into the first really challenging fight of the challenge run. And the reason this is difficult is because of the way the guns work in Spider-Man, and we're going to be talking for the next 2 hours about how the guns work in this game. Additionally, these tutorial moments where it kind of freezes the game, they're a bit screwy on high frame rates. If you have any problems, cap your frame rate at 60 and you should be okay. I had a couple of soft locks in the game when the game refused to do things because my frame rate was too high. And that's something that shouldn't happen on a modern PC port, but it absolutely does. There were a couple of vents I couldn't move through on higher frames and things of that nature, which is really frustrating, but when you're playing it's worth it because of course higher frames makes it easier to see the game, it makes it more responsive, it makes it more fun to play. And this encounter is difficult because of the guns. And how the guns should work is they will aim at you and then they will go red and they will fire. And if you press the evade button, Spider-Man will essentially turn off their ability to shoot you. That seems to be how it works for the most. Every so often you can get a little bit unlucky and you can still get hit, but there's usually a decent amount of consistency to the guns. Until there isn't. And there aren't many moments where the guns will blatantly cheat and blatantly lie and do things they shouldn't do, but every so often you get these sequences that really stand out. And there is one moment in the game which is the hardest part of the game in my opinion because it's completely fucking broken. And it was broken the first time I did a no damage run on PlayStation 4 and it's broken still to this day. And it's simply because the guns do not follow the same rules they do for the rest of the game. And we're going to talk about that a decent amount and we're going to talk about it when it happens, but fundamentally You shouldn't have problems with guns in this game until you do. And it's going to happen. It's just an inevitability. It's not a skill issue either. It's not about reacting. It's not about pressing an evade. Evading a line on your body that's like 30 frames is not difficult to do. It's when you do it and they still hit you. And then I have evidence of them aiming at you and shooting you without giving you a telegraph. Like, you cannot fight a machine that does not play by the rules. It's just a reset, and there's nothing you can really do. And my counter-argument to any counter-argument is watch this video. Does it look like I have problems dodging bullets? Does it look like I have problems, you know, getting around lasers on my body? I don't, because I'm okay at this game. It's just when the game refuses to function, there's nothing a good player can do. You just lose. However, you shouldn't get any instances of that. The only thing that might happen on PC here is the rockets. For some reason on this tutorial coming up, it's really weird where Spider-Man won't react sometimes because the frames. So cap your frame rate, put VSync on, something like that, and you should be okay. But a couple of strategies that you'll see me doing a decent amount. I'm going to use everything I can in the environment because it's a lot more fun. I'm going to launch people a decent amount because launching them is a lot of fun too, and it's generally quite safe. I'm also going to get a lot of mileage from sweeping under people and then kicking them from behind. And this move right here is very good because not only can it knock away other people, but it is a guaranteed knockdown on the enemies. And from there you can do interesting things to them, you can separate them and then focus on their friends, you can do all kinds of good stuff. However, it comes with a bit of a caveat. Because the enemies are at their maximum aggression on this difficulty, when you do this move, if an enemy is running towards you to punch you, you have to cancel out of it. You have to try and cancel it. Because if you don't, like just then, see that? If I went through with a full move then, there's no guarantee that I could stop that guy about to punch me. And this is kind of how Spider-Man works. It doesn't work like Arkham. It doesn't work like the Batman series where when someone's about to do an attack, you do a jump and you'll always get away from it. In this game, if you press the dodge button too soon, their move is active so long and tracks so well and covers so much distance that they will just hit you on the end of your roll. And what this leads to is dodging in this game is kind of different to how you perhaps want to do it. You either dodge it precisely or you spam. And a lot of the times it's usually easier than to dodge to get out of there by either jumping and webbing somewhere or by doing the web move that pulls you to a different place. And there's a few instances like that where sometimes just dodging is a bad idea. Sometimes jumping might be better. There is a whole host of opportunities where using the dodge in the game will get you fucked. And you don't want to lose to something when you feel like you should have been okay, but it is going to happen because the more you bang on a game on the harder difficulties and under restrictions, the more you realise odd things happen. But the interesting thing with the dodge is it only punishes people who are being precise. When you spam, you seem to get out of jail for free a lot of the time, and every so often you'll still get caught, which I think is good, because I don't think it should ever encourage spam, in my opinion. That being said, most people will probably press the dodge button several times instead of pressing it just once. But just be aware that every so often, if you do press it once, unless you know the animation and you know the timing, and you do the timing, it can end up biting you. And I think when you come from a game like Arkham, it can be really awkward, because you're so used to pressing evade and getting away with murder. Because in that game, when you press evade in Arkham, you never get hit. You just don't. It's very binary in the way it works, whereas here, it's not quite the same. And I prefer it personally because it leads to making me having to play better and having to be sharper. And one of the downsides, I think, of the competitor's combat system, which I used to question on YouTube, do you think that Spider-Man has better combat than Arkham? And it was almost universal that people thought that Arkham series had much better combat, and I would agree fundamentally, but I do think that this game, when you have all the upgrades, has just got more interesting things going for it than the early Arkhams, because Arkham is more of a rhythm game. It's more of... It's an interesting rhythm game, and it's got things that I really enjoy, but it doesn't feel as combat-y as this game does when you have a lot of the moves and a lot of the gear, because you can do some fun stuff in this. And even when you use all the gadgets in Arkham, you still are kind of a... You're a bit of a prisoner to the hit string, aren't you? The hit string that Batman invents as he goes. Before anybody's like, you know, dude, how can you say this? The game's a masterpiece. I prefer Arkham's combat to Spider-Man's. I do. I prefer it by a large margin, actually. However, I do appreciate some of the free flow and some of the cancels that you can do in this game that make you feel like you're in control. And there are some really, really cool moments that can emerge just by playing normally, and I really enjoy that. However, there's a lot of instances with that same thought in vain that they lead to these dynamically scripted interactions that kind of make the game look dumb. And it's one of those things that will lead to a couple of failures on a run like this, purely based off the fact that you don't get what you want. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because 90% of the time, Spider-Man's really good at giving you what you ask for. But that 10% where he kind of does something dumb and gets stuck on a railing or on a desk, or grabs the wrong thing, or goes off the wall and attacks the wrong person, or doesn't attack anyone at all, those moments are the only moments you remember. And it can be really unfortunate, I think, to the mechanics. It can make you be harsher than you'd like to be, because instead of remembering all the times it went right, you remember the times it went wrong. And for instance, a fight like this fight here is a bunch of people with shields and a bunch of people with guns in a big room, because you're about to fight a boss in this room. This is a really interesting fight. And for the most, you won't have much trouble here because it all works. You know, you do the B into the X to slide under and kick the shield guy from behind, and you dodge the guns. But you'll notice, you see this fire that I'm stood near right here? You should never go near that fire, ever. Because if you do, it'll hurt you. And this is the kind of thing that Spider-Man, I'm going to do that a lot, I apologise if I do it by mistake. But this is where Spider-Man really reigns supreme in shit that shouldn't be, that gets in the way of the fun. So, it's cool that this room has flames in it. Why do they hurt you? Why do they make you flinch? Why do they affect the fight at all? Like, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't add anything to the game. All it does is make me reset on a good run when I just did a really cool combo, but I did a backflip, and I landed in some fire I couldn't fucking see because it was off the screen. And that's kind of the Spider-Man thing, you know? Everything's going really, really well, and then Spider-Man grabs a bin instead of a tyre, and then it all goes badly. As we take on Mr. Fisk here, which... Fisk is a big dude in this game. He is classed as one of the heavy class enemies, and the heavy class enemies are very unique on this difficulty because they're much more difficult to web. A lot of people using all the gadgets will simply just use some of the bigger things on some of the fat guys later on, but right now you don't have access to that. So instead, you can get into this interesting chain of events where you web Fisk, you do the interaction on him, and then you throw something at him to stun him. And it seems like the general rule of these guys is you can web them until they're immobilized and then you can attack them. You can attack them from behind, but they tend to recover really quickly. Or you can throw something at them, and then after you throw something at them, they don't have the automatic protection that they normally do. But be really careful with Captain Zoom Fist here, because this dude is like Michael Jackson. He covers some insane distance when he swings. He gets this crazy inertia slide and covers about 2 meters every punch when he wants to. So you might think that you're away from him and you can just run away from him. You can't, because he's about to do some lunging teleport bullshit, and it will stop you. So be very careful with being lenient on the big dudes, because it'll cost you in the end. But you have to hit this dude with a bunch of executions, and you think the executions would end the fight, but they don't. But now we get the cutscene that triggers us into the second phase and the true fight, which is the one with the enemies in the room and the fire. And again, guys, the biggest problem of this room, of doing this fight, it's not the goons, it's not the henchmen, it's not Kingpin, it's not him throwing things, even though sometimes he can hit you with that, he's got a right aimbot. It's the fire. It's overextending and, you know, trying to evade and then ending up getting hit by something that shouldn't affect the fight. And I'm all for environmental hazards when they're done well, but this just feels kind of tenuous and stupid. And I like this fight a lot as well. I think this is a really cool way of starting the game. It's one of my favourite parts of the game as well, because it's all gameplay, and you don't have to worry too much about like waiting for missions to pop up and doing open world things so that they can tutorialize and contextualize a bunch of things you don't want to do. You know, there's quite a lot of that in this game, and we're going to be talking about that too, because the more I play Spider-Man, the more I realise that it's kind of a bad game. And I don't want to be the guy that says that, because I do love it, and I have had a lot of fun with it, and I thought casually the first time I played it, it was great. But now that I've spent more time with it, and now that I've spent more time with how it works and how it's framed, it's really soured me on the whole structure of it. And we're definitely going to do some talking about that, because I think it's really important. And it's important to be fair too, because I've been very critical of some lesser games for having the issues that this game has as well. And it can be easy to shit on Naughty Dog, and it can be easy to shit on, you know, Guardians of the Galaxy. when this game, even though it's made by a developer I adore, has a lot of the things that I found obnoxious in those games. So stay tuned for that tangent, ladies and gentlemen. When will it turn up? Who knows? Will I forget to talk about it? Probably. But I couldn't find a guaranteed combo on this guy that was interesting to watch / effective. So instead I just kind of freestyled with some charge punches and throwing things at him and looping him a little bit. Some of the other bosses, I've got some really good loops, guys, which will make them really easy. Especially if you're going to be using any of the attachments that you can get in the gadgets and the gizmos and things. There are so many cool abilities in this game to enable you to just decimate people. It's really, really different when you choose not to use them. The thing with it is, though, this project really wasn't that much more difficult than my first NoDamage run, which was nowhere near as restricted as this, and nowhere near, because I was still upgrading and still using features. And the parts that were hard were the same parts, and they're all hard for the same reason. Molotovs that are horrendously telegraphed, guns that don't function in one fight in particular, and then bad checkpoints, which the game only has about 3 bad checkpoints, but I can promise you each of them was a giant pain in my ass. And this is the end of the fight. This is the end of the boss fight. Which will be interesting to see, guys. Go from this project to my first NoDamage run and see how I edited the cutscene. Because I would imagine that I edited it to a similar fashion to this, but I'm hoping it's different. Because I like shortening cutscenes and keeping them in a walkthrough so that they don't completely steal focus, but they can be used to frame 2 pieces of gameplay. And every time I do it, I tend to do it slightly differently because my persuasions in those moments is different. Or are different. But you'll have to go and see if it is different or if it's just verbatim. But we have our first mission on the street here, which is introducing us to a side mission. It's also showing you what happens to these enemies that have crowbars. And the crowbar enemy is kind of unique because he will block your moves and he will do an interesting counter. But you can use him to do one of the interesting pieces of tech that's in Spider-Man, which I invented, of course. No one had ever done this before me. Which is, you can do a move that provokes him to do that counterattack that he does, and then you can use that slow motion that the game gives you during that counterattack of his to do a move on someone else. And you inherit that slow motion into an attack on a third party, and it looks amazing. But I could never get it to do it when I wanted it to, and every time I did it, it was on a run that I lost. So you're probably not going to see that in this gameplay, but if you've ever done it yourself, which I'm assuming most people have stumbled on this, it looks really cool. Because you can go to punch the guy and get him to counter you, and then you can do like a charge punch and hold away from him, and you'll uppercut somebody and launch them in slow motion, and it looks really, really sick. And it's so good, but it might not be the standard weapon, dude. It might be the guy that's got the electric weapon. I think he might be slightly different. But it's the same concept. There are enemies in this game that have certain traits that make them different, and this is one right here. This guy has the same traits as Kingpin. And I was experimenting on this fight to see what I could do with this dude, because he does not get webbed at all. Like, this is where this difficulty really shows its teeth. And I just threw a bunch of shit at him because it was kind of funny. However, the best way to fight him in that moment is to throw something at him, then attack him, then when he recovers, throw something else at him. And if you want to web him in between some of that stuff, that can be useful, because when you web them, you can execute them if you build up enough focus power. And then we have this fight in the Jewelers here, which has got a really, really cool camera angle against just a couple of the tracksuit guys. But did you see that? I webbed him a bunch, I pulled him down, and it didn't stick him to the floor. If you play on any lower difficulty, that guy would have been webbed. And that is the cool thing about a difficulty that is physically different to the previous ones. You can't watch this video, guys, and say, oh, you're lying, this is cheated. You know, you're on the wrong difficulty, this is clearly not ultimate, because it doesn't work like that on the other difficulties. You know? It's really, really harsh, this one. Even the standard enemies are incredibly harsh when it comes to taking them down. But now we have... I think this is probably the hardest part of the first part of the game, which is the Fisk warehouse that we're taking on here, this construction site, this hideout. And I don't know enough about this game, because I just haven't played it in a while until I came back to do this. Can you do this whole thing in stealth, guys? Or is it mandatory that that alert happens and you have to do the final few waves as combat? Because I watched a speedrun after I recorded this walkthrough to see what people were doing. To see if that somebody'd found some crazy tech and some really, really effective way of doing the game. And it was a new game speedrun on Ultimate as well. It's same difficulty, same concept of what I'm doing, only without the no upgrades, no items, no abilities, things like that. And he fought this just like I did. And it makes me think that that might be the fastest way to do it, but maybe if you do perfect stealth, it doesn't ever kick off. And the reason I say this is, if you're going to do this challenge run, then I recommend you do the fight, because it's one of the hardest ones. If you're looking for a challenge, you're going to find it. However, if you're just trying to get through the game and you're struggling, I would try and recommend to do it stealth. I just do not believe, from my testing, because I did reload this a few times to see if I could do it a little bit better, it seems like it's structured to show you that you can stealth these waves, but if you make a mistake, it changes how the whole function works. And I think that they're trying to show you that that's what the game does. And it's interesting too, because the stealth in Spider-Man I'm not going to be removing, because technically there are fail states in the stealth, and it has a dynamic nature to it where doing it without all the abilities is going to be slightly different to how some people would do it. It's going to take a little bit longer, I'm going to have to get a little bit more creative, but fundamentally, I can show you something here that you might want to see, that you might enjoy watching. Whereas, you know, some of the other stealth moments where you're just sneaking around as Mary J, that stuff is so dog shit. I just don't even begin to understand the pacing of the game. And it makes me question why they're even there. And it's really funny too, because the game has a feature which I first saw in Castlevania Lords of Shadows, which is an option to skip puzzles. So if you don't want to watch some kind of strange mystery unveiling in front of you, and you're the person trying to solve it, you can skip that completely. You can just say, I'm not interested, press a button, and it skips the puzzles. And for people that don't like puzzles, it's a godsend, because when you do things in games you don't want to do, it gets frustrating and it makes you want to stop playing. And I think it's a really clever touch, because the first time I beat the game, I did the puzzles. They were okay. They're nothing to write home about. I've never done them since, because I always skip them. And here the fight starts, by the way, guys. This is where everything went wrong. So the fight, by the way, is you do 2 waves, I think, then you get a checkpoint, then you have to do another 2 waves. It is pretty demanding. There's a lot of bombs, there's a lot of guns, there's a lot of enemies, and the spawns are kind of structured in such a way that it can be awkward and easy to end up running into a situation where you get clobbered because you didn't realise you were getting mobbed. But a couple of things to note. We've been introduced now to the proclivity of the grenade guy. That grenade that he throws, the shield guys throw them as well. Every time that grenade is out, if you pick it up and throw it at somebody, you will do yourself a huge favour, because the grenade has big range, it can hit you when you dodge, it can also hit you when you jump sometimes, which is really odd, but there it is. And the moment you grab it, you stop its fuse. So there is no reason not to use grenades that enemies throw, because you will almost always stun the people around you and then do more damage than you're going to do on this run. So it's a very good habit to get into. However, you put yourself in the hands of the RNG, because every so often Peter will pick the wrong thing to target and the grenade will hurt you. And when that happens, there's nothing you can really do. And one of the biggest problems that I have with the combat in this game is that it's not as good at cancelling into the executions as Arkham is. In the Arkham games, when you cancel from a standard hit string and a standard combo or a standard special into an execution, it does it immediately, the detection is really good and you're invincible. Whereas in this game, there's times where I've done like 3 rolls in a row because Spider-Man won't do the move. And it's the exact same input as Arkham. It's not like I'm not good at the inputs. It's not like the controller's not working. Like, there are times when it just doesn't cancel into the move. Sometimes it does it too slow and you just get shot. There's a lot of situations where you will try to do a cancel into an execution and it'll just leave you kind of hanging and do it a bit too slow. This is something you can work with. Now that you know it works that way, never get put in a situation where you have to eat it. So one of the best ways to kind of get around it is do an execution from midair. When you're in midair, Spider-Man comes down on them and then stomps them, and it's really quick. And that way you don't have to worry about the repercussions because you're already invincible and you're already doing the move. But this fight goes on forever, and you have to fight more dudes than you'll fight in the game here. This right here is probably the longest sequence of enemies outside of the prison. And the prison in the Into the Fire level is easily the hardest level in the game. So for this to come so soon and be so demanding, it is kind of interesting, especially if you've not woken up to the game and you don't have everything down. But do you see that? There's no reason not to do what I did then. It's just, it makes too much sense not to do it. So I would recommend that you do. But the puzzles being able to be skipped, I think, is such a clever idea that it really does boggle my mind why you can't skip all the other shit. And I can understand on a first playthrough they don't want you doing it because they want you to experience the game. And I've got nothing against people experiencing the game. I want that too. I want people to realise that playing as Peter Parker in this game is fucking dog shit. I want them to realise that playing as Mary Jane makes you resent the game because all you want to do is be Spider-Man and swing around. I want to understand why they think interrupting the game, every like odd mission number, is in any way a way to bolster a relationship with the game. Because it just feels like a really awkward and convoluted framing device for a story that's not that interesting, that's been told a million times before. And all it does is hurt the player coming back to play the game again. And then when you compound this issue with the fact the game has no mission select, which I will never understand. I don't think I've ever played a fucking game that didn't have mission select in like the last 5 years. It just seems like a strange choice to not give the player the ability to repeat the best parts of your game. But alas, Spider-Man didn't have that at launch, it didn't get that patched in, and instead they gave us some half-assed New Game Plus that I've got no interest in. And it's frustrating, guys. And you might wonder, well, you know, why does it bug you so much? It seems like such a small thing. And casually it is, but I'm not a casual player, you know. This is my job to make this video, you know, as condescending as that might seem. I am playing this from a professional perspective of doing a cool project that you might enjoy. And when I do that, I don't want to play the game again. I want to fucking record the game, and I want to do it as quickly as I physically can. Because that's what benefits me, you know. So when I was recording this game, for instance, I did the start of it, I jumped straight into the first fight, after that massive intro that's unskippable, that does my fucking head in. And then after that, I'm stood in the city waiting for the next mission to turn up, and you stand there and you restart checkpoint to see if you can make it trigger, it doesn't trigger. You stand there for about a minute, it doesn't trigger. You sit there for like 2.5 minutes before it pops up the next objective, and then you spend the next 2.5 minutes swinging through the city to get to it. Why? Why do I have to waste 5 minutes to get to a mission for the mission to be me walking around while Peter talks to himself, while Aunt May tells me about her fucking heavy flow, and then afterwards I leave the building to go and sit for another 2.5 minutes, to then swing for another 2.5 minutes, to get to a mission where I can finally be Spider-Man? Why can't I press pause, click a fucking menu, and pick the mission where I am Spider-Man and I'm fighting? Why can't I do that? This is not something that's difficult to do. This is not something that's industry defining. This is industry standard. And it's not in this game. Why? You know, it boggles my mind that this game can be so good and get so many accolades and yet miss on so many key components. And all those components do are make me more annoyed at a game I used to really like. And it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because you'll get your players who love the game who just think that this sounds like needless complaining. But it's not needless complaining when I spend 8 hours recording a guide and 3 of those hours are completely meaningless. You know? Time is valuable. It's the most valuable asset that we have. And I spent it doing something I've done 4 times before that wasn't fun the first time. And it really irks me that. Because we have games that let you, you know, pick encounters. We have games that let you pick checkpoints. We have games that let you pick chapters. We have these features. And I don't understand why this game has been released 3 fucking times now. PS4, PS5 and PC. And we still don't have basic functionality that would make the game a lot more enjoyable for a lot of people. Because it's not just me. And I think of things like Uncharted. If you remember Uncharted 4, it had this feature called an encounter selector. Which when I first saw that, I thought that sounded amazing. Because the guide maker in my head goes, I can pick all the fights and just record those, and I don't have to do all the exposition, I don't have to do all the narrative, all the platforming, all the puzzles, all the driving, all the walking. I don't have to do any of that. But then you play that mode and you realise that it's good idea, good first attempt, but wrong. Because they don't cut the encounters correctly, so they cut them off. And there are moments in those encounters which are really cool, and are still technically gameplay with fail states that you don't do, because they just trim them. And I spent about 10 minutes with that mode, and then immediately realised it was useless, because it didn't do what I needed it to do, what I wanted it to do, what it should have done, in my opinion. This is funny too, because you know how I mentioned that when you get near geometry in this game, things get fucky? that was one of those examples. But that takes us to the Shocker boss fight in the bank. Shocker's really interesting in this game because his projectile has got wicked tracking until it doesn't. So every so often, he will hit you in insane times where you feel like he shouldn't, and then there's other times where it's almost as if he's got cataracts and he can't do anything correct. And this fight is very Bowser. You do 3 things and then things happen, and you do 3 things and then things happen, and that's pretty much it. And the start phase is the one where you can be the least capable. So you dodge his projectile, and then he does his little stun move, and then you throw an object at him, and then you get to do a combo until he protects himself, and then it moves into the next part, and you do this a few times. Towards the end of this, I'm going to show you a really dirty loop on this boss where he can't get out of it, and you just get to hit him for free. The only issue with it is that you're dependent on the game giving you the prompt to throw debris. You're also dependent on Spider-Man throwing the right debris. Every so often, he won't, but in my recording for this, I managed to get it pretty much consistently on the 2 attempts that I did to make sure it was real. And it ended up being a really good fight. But right here, it gives you a gap and you can hit him with the debris, and then you can come back in and then you get the next phase. All of this is checkpointed, so you don't have to worry too much about getting hit. You can use the swings to dodge his projectiles. You can also sprint to dodge them. But be really careful sprinting to dodge them, because Peter has this obsession with pretending he's Ezio from Assassin's Creed. He will dynamically roll over anything he comes into contact with, and when he does that, you're not invincible and you can't dodge out of it because it's a canned animation. So you won't hit any geometry until the moment Shocker fires, and then you'll try to dodge, it won't happen, you'll get hit. So be really, really careful of that. But right here is the loop. So you knock him into the air, then you slam him down, and as he's recovering, you throw the projectile at him again. And it's really, really good. So this is the next phase. See me doing the stupid runs? This is why I told you not to run. Because every time Spider-Man does that fancy parkour bullshit, it's not good. And then this is the final phase right here where you avoid him a bunch of times, then he gives you an opening, and then you can pull the part of the ceiling down. And I kind of wish that the QTEs in this game felt a little bit better. Because every time I come back to it, I love what's happening with the camera, I love what's happening in the game, but I feel like the connection between the audio and the gratification of the player and the connection to the game while it's happening, I feel like it's a bit disconnected. And if you've ever played a game called Azura's Wrath, I think that's the game that most games should learn from. Because Azura's Wrath is not much of a game, it's more of a cutscene than anything else with a lot of QTEs. But the QTEs in that game are really satisfying to do. They realise that if you're going to be pressing QTEs a lot, they're going to make the most goddamn satisfying QTEs they can. And I think they were really effective too. So I'd love to see more games get that crunch, get that connection, and get that sensation of feeling connected to the actions that are happening. But we're at the docks now. And this is always kind of a bit of a down period for the game for me. Because whenever I think of recording this game, I think of the moment when you're inside the warehouse with the police officer solving that puzzle. And I can't even begin to explain to you how satisfying it was editing that puzzle out. And if you're watching this, folks, and you find it a bit disorientating because you'd like more of the game in it, if you want to watch my other No-Damage run, that No-Damage run has a conventional walkthrough in there. It doesn't just have the encounters. So you can get a little bit more Spider-Man, and it's essentially the same thing, really. It's just this is a different difficulty, and I have less equipment to be effective with. But the stealth in this game is very strong. If you've never played before, there is a detective vision in Spider-Man, and it tells you whether or not the enemy is going to alert the other enemies when you take them down. And there are 2 takedowns that you can use. There's a quiet takedown, and that generally immobilizes. This was funny right here, as Spider-Man does the opposite of anything I fucking want him to do. As you can imagine, every so often this happens because the movement is so scripted, it's kind of frustrating. But you'll notice just then, the takedown immobilized him. The square takedown does that. It generally webs them against a wall or hides them on like a balcony. Whereas the triangle one is faster, but it leaves the body where it is. And the choice that you make between the 2 depends on the result that you want. But you can tell just by the icon. If the icon goes pink, then you will safely and quietly dispatch a goon. If it's green, it means you can do the triangle one, but the repercussions are up in the air. Bit of a dice roll. And usually, if you want to be super aggro, you can take out a couple of bothersome people with the quiet one, and then you can chain the final enemies with the triangle quick one. And as long as you're quick, they won't find the bodies and they won't deviate from their patterns. And the only problem when they find bodies is they start doing different patrols. And a lot of the time, the patrols when they see a body is easier than the patrols they were doing before they did. And it leads to the biggest problem the game has when it comes to stealth. Spider-Man's too good at it. The game doesn't give you enough problems to solve during the stealth moments to make them anything more than just a palate cleanser between combat and expositional walking sequence. And that's just how it works. It's hard to balance something like this, in my opinion, because you get two sides of it. You get the person that wants the stealth to be really difficult, and then you get the person that wants Spider-Man to be really strong. So when you say that, I think it should be harder for Spider-Man to take down a group of people in a stealth encounter, you will come up against the resistance of, but he's a fucking spider, he's a superhero, dude, he beats up supervillains. He webs everybody in a single second and sticks them to the wall and they never knew he was there. And then you have to kind of reason with a logic that doesn't work in a video game. And it's like, I appreciate Spider-Man is a superhero, and that's why people like him, but it doesn't make a very interesting game, does it, when you press one button and win? And to me, it seems kind of obvious that, you know, in order for the game to be interesting for the player, there has to be some creative liberty taken in order to challenge them. And that's what the guns are, essentially. The guns in this game exist to put pressure on you because Spider-Man is really capable. And for the most, it works okay, but the stealth is where I think the system falls down the most. And for me, I would have just made the AI a little bit more punishing. Because think about something like Dishonored, you know, think about something like Splinter Cell. If you take somebody down and somebody sees a body, everybody goes into an alert, everybody changes into a mode where the game starts to get really dynamic and a lot more difficult. Like, they could have made it so that the guys, when they're alerted, look up. And it's kind of funny to me, because when you look at something like Arkham's design, at the start of Arkham, Batman's really capable, and all you do is sit on gargoyles and destroy people. It's really crazy, isn't it, how capable you are on those gargoyles and how good your gadgets are. And because you only take down 2 or 3 goons, you kind of think, Jesus Christ, I'm so powerful. No one's going to be able to stop me. How is this going to be challenging? And then you play further into it and you realise they thought about this. You know, they really contemplated what they could do. And they started giving people collars, they started putting bombs on the gargoyles, they started putting these situations where the enemies were a little bit more aware and could be alerted in more ways. And then you started with more enemies and different scenarios, and then different requirements during the scenarios, and then you realise the stealth in Arkham is better than Spider-Man in every conceivable way, because they contemplated making it a video game rather than a roller coaster. And I personally don't mind the stealth encounters in this game. I think that they're a nice power fantasy for a player that needs that. And I've done so much stealth in video games right now that when stealth sequences turn up, they kind of feel like those walking sequences that every game had like 10 years ago. This is the guy, by the way, this weapon man here. Did you see him just then? When you press Y on this weapon guy, he will do a pirouette and then whack you with his weapon. And it slows the game down to show you that you need to counter him. During that slow motion is when you can do moves on other people and get really fancy slow-mo combos. And it's super good. And all you do, guys, is you press triangle to go towards him, and then you hold a charge punch facing away from him, and you hope someone's away from him, and you hope you hit that person, and you hope you go up before he smacks you. It's a lot of hoping, but it looks cool. And this fight's really funny too, because I thought it bugged out. And what I was doing when I was recording this, at the end of all the fights, I tried to stand still if I could, so that I could link the encounter to whatever happened next from a static pose. And on this one, I stand there, waiting, thinking it's the end of the fight, checking OBS, and there's one dude just stood off in a corner that does nothing. He doesn't even engage me, he just kind of stands there, and it doesn't seem like he's afraid, he just seems like he doesn't really know what to do. And then we get this weird moment here where I end up lugging this dude onto this balcony, and whenever you're in a position like this, the game it gets a little fucky. So you want to be as careful as you can. There it was just then, that counter move that he did. So I'm just going to put him down with the takedown, And then I'm going to fight his friends. Could have webbed him then, but I chose not to. Trying to do some more interesting things with the mobility in the air so it looks a little cooler. And I kept trying to do that too, but it doesn't seem to work. I love the idea of knocking them up and then spinning an object, and as they come down, the object hits them and it relaunches them. But every time you do it, the object seems to break and they just seem to fall. See this? There's a guy alive. He's behind me. There he is. What was he doing? In moments like that, I get tempted to restart the project. And I say restart the project, I mean the fight. You know, I get tempted to just restart checkpoints so I can do it again, because I don't want it to look like that. I want it to look seamless and everything linked together. And speaking of seamless, so this is Fisk's building site. This is a really, really difficult segment because it has a really, really bad checkpoint, and then it has probably the ugliest checkpoint I've seen since an Uncharted game. So you have to rescue, I think it's 4 different people on this. And every time you do one, it gives you a checkpoint, but it doesn't checkpoint you where you were when you got it. It sticks you on this girder that's off the side of the building site. So what you're going to see, guys, is you're going to see me drop from the sky repeatedly onto the same piece of geometry. And if you watch the screen, you'll notice on the hood, it goes from 1 out of 4, 2 out of 4, 3 out of 4, 4 out of 4. But it looks like I'm just restarting, and I'm not. And of course, I don't do these in one attempt. If you're wondering, you know, how this happens, this is a segmented no damage, no upgrades run. Segmented, guys. I'm going to put that in the description for the people who, for some reason, think that I do this in one attempt, like I'm some kind of robot. I don't. I get hit a lot. I make a ton of mistakes. Sometimes the game makes mistakes. Sometimes it's 100% me. Sometimes it's a combination of the two. So, when I was doing it, there's a lot of guns here as well. It's really frustrating. So when you were doing this, to me, I don't understand why the checkpoint wouldn't just instance where you were when you got it. And then it would be really easy to link the footage together. And of course, that leads to that situation of splicing and cheating and editing and all these things that people talk about, which I've been talking about a lot recently on stream, which is the idea of, if you don't know, guys, I believe in editing videos, I do. I'm a firm believer of it. I think you can edit a single segment video as long as you're honest, and as long as you convey to people what you've done. And as long as that's okay and you're being truthful and you're not trying to hide something, I think that's absolutely okay. That's just my belief system, that's how I feel about it, that's what I've done for the last 10 years. However, I don't like people trying to hide things. I don't like people editing to get around something that happened that they didn't do or that they didn't want you to see or something that was wrong, and then trying to pass it off as a single segment run. I don't want somebody telling you that they did it in one attempt when they clearly didn't. You know, that to me is, it goes against the whole body of work of what we're all doing. And it happens a lot. It's just one of those things. You see speedrunners cheating, you see Guitar Hero players cheating, you see all kinds of cheating, and the only person that loses is us, is everybody that plays the fucking game and does the challenge runs, you know? And I'm a person who, I like cheating, I do, as long as you're honest with it and as long as it makes sense. And I talk about this quite a lot. And I'm going to talk about it here too, to get some people's opinions that might not have heard this topic. So right now, guys, I'm doing a no damage run of this game. And when I get hit, I restart the checkpoint. Of course, it doesn't mean I don't take damage, it just means that you don't see it, because I edit that out. And it makes it look like one seamless fight, one seamless, you know, series of encounters where I beat everybody up and I look like a great player. If I had a trainer on right now and I was invincible, guys, would you think I was cheating? Would that ruin what you're watching right now? Because I think this is a really interesting perspective, this. Because in this fight, I'm going to kill everybody in this room and no one's going to hit me. No one. No guns, no bullets, no grenades, no damage. And if you think about it, even if I had invincibility on right now, it wouldn't make a blind bit of difference. Because when you get hit in this game, Spiderman staggers, Spiderman flinches, you know, you can see it. That's one of the cool things about a well-designed game. When you get hit in a game, a lot of the times you get knocked down, or something tangible happens. So in that moment, you're using a trainer, but if you don't get hit, it's as if the trainer wasn't there. And I'd just like to add here, I'm not using a trainer, even though I'm not going to get hit, I'm not using one right now. And I did experiment with this game with the trainer, because I wanted to see what it could do, and to see if it could make some things less pain-free. And in the end, I didn't really end up needing it. But what I did do, which is very important, I took damage on a fight at the beginning of this guide. It was, you know that control room in Fisk's building at the start of the game before you fight him? When I was pulling something from the roof, I got hit there, but I didn't notice. And I recorded it, and I kept on recording. And because this game doesn't have a mission select, and because it doesn't have an encounter select, and all those things I was griping about earlier, I started a new game on a different save file. I put the trainer on with the one-hit kills, and I got all the way back up to that fight so I could re-record it. In that moment, ladies and gentlemen, that trainer saved me probably about an hour. Because I could do it in 2 seconds. I could do it really quickly. I could just burn back through it, boom, record. Is that cheating? Because in some people's minds, it is. And me saying that would kind of ruin the integrity of this video for some people. Which, if you have that opinion, more power to you. I just don't think it's right. And this is why it leads to this interesting question when it comes to cheating. When you use cheats to augment an experience and to make something more enjoyable, within the parameters of what you are doing, I have no issue with that. However, if you're telling people that you're doing something very impressive, something that is top 1%, something that's 0.01%, something that is best in the world, first in the world, or competing with the highest echelons of play, this is where things change. This is where standards change. Because the standards you have to adhere to aren't your own anymore, unless you're doing it for fun. This is fun, guys. This video is a fun playthrough, you know? It's meant to be something fun for you guys to watch. Some footage for the channel, basically. I've done this before. I've done this on original hardware. No trainers. No cheat engines available. No, like, doubtful things to add there, because you can't do it. So for me, honesty in this kind of stuff is really important. And also an understanding that cheating can be a tool that you use for good. Again, I want to preface here, guys. I'm not defending cheaters. I would never defend cheaters. I don't like cheating. Cheating goes against who I am as a person. And I'm not talking about GTA. I'm not talking about getting all the guns. You know, I'm not talking about Turok 2, getting all the guns and being invincible and actually being able to enjoy the game when you're a kid. I'm not talking about that as cheating. That's cheat codes. They're still cheats, but cheating is different. When you're cheating communities, when you're cheating your peers, and when you're cheating yourself, I think that's different, personally. And I find it interesting that it's happening so much, and we're seeing so much of it. Recently, there's been another controversy in the Guitar Hero community where one of the best players in the world, a 15-year-old kid, has started to fake his runs for reasons unbeknownst. This person is already very, very good without that, and they've, for some reason, decided to... I don't know, the pressures of, you know, being a big dick in that community got to them, and they've used some tool assistance, shall we say. Guitar Hero is a small community of incredibly dedicated and skillful players. I would usually say there's not much money in it, so why bother, right? However, that community values those achievements so much and wants to motivate those high-end players that when you FC a song in that community, which is called a full combo where you hit all the notes in a row without missing, people put bounties out of real money that they are fronting themselves because they want to motivate and inspire somebody to do something amazing. And when that amazing thing is done, the person that puts that bounty out, they're not sad that they have to pay that money. They're happy. They're happy because the community has evolved and something amazing has been done. So when that person that claims that bounty is using the cheat engine to splice together two different runs and make it look like a single run, it hurts everybody. And I like editing. I love editing. I'm an editor. You know, it's what I learned. It's what I do. It's something that I have a ton of fun with. If I could show you the wavelength right now, you could see all the edits in this. There's probably 200 edits in this project. For me to say to you guys that this is a single segment would be a lie. And it would be cheating. Because it's not. But there are people that would believe me if I said that. And there are people that would believe that just because they're not as media aware as some other people. To me, the honesty of what you do in your work is the most important part of it. I'm not trying to be the best Spider-Man player in the world. I'm not trying to put out something here that's going to, you know, cause commotion or start some waves. It's not my place. I don't care about the game enough, you know. It's not really a game that I'll probably play again. Outside of Miles Morales, which I'm really excited for, because I've never played that. So this is not for me to come in here and be like, I am the big dick of Spider-Man, and I'm going to show all you Spider-Man purists how it's done. And I'm going to say this is single-segmented, I'm going to say that this is one attempt, I'm going to say that I was born to play Spider-Man. And all you guys that actually play Spider-Man and know how tricky it is, and know how easy it is to get, you know, hit and reset and things, you're all going to feel like shit because some random scrub's turned up and has made this god run that essentially cuckolds all the hard work that you've done. And if you watch this, you will notice the edits. So if you are one of those players who's very good at the game, very, very critical of the footage that they watch, very learned of, you know, the natures of humans to cheat, you're going to watch this and go, whoa, 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 what was that at 2 minutes and 35 seconds or whatever? And you're going to go, that's not seamless, that's not one piece of footage. So then you're going to start asking questions, aren't you? Then you're going to come either messaging or in the comments calling people out or getting into Discord chats or whatever people end up doing. And then you're going to want to get some answers. And you're going to go to the source. And in this situation, for instance, imagine, right guys, let's just use a hypothetical here. Imagine I did this entire project, single segment, and never made a mistake. I did a flawless 2 hours of pure gameplay, which would probably be closer to like 6 hours once you trim everything out. But I edited it down because I wanted it to be more seamless to watch. The best Spider-Man players in the world got together in a Discord calling it bullshit because they realised that there's edits, a million edits in it, very obvious. And then they call me out publicly. And they say, this is garbage, this is not single segment, this is segmented. Here's the evidence, here's the Google Doc, here's the autism, all that kind of stuff. Which as much as I like to joke, I respect when people do this, and I like that people do this. We've got a new enemy coming here, by the way. We've got guys that have got these masks on that do all kinds of crazy damaging moves with shockwaves, and then we have a guy with electric whips, and he's real interesting. And the thing to bear in mind here is they're still the same as the standard enemies you've fought, they've just got a little bit of extra oomph and some shockwaves. So be very careful, but kill them accordingly. In that situation, when I get called out, because I've done it, I can prove it. All I would do is send them the raw. Or I would make a video. I would make a video using display capture, and I would take them into my PC, into my editor, and I would show them the full file. And I would ask them on like a call, sharing screen on Discord or something. I'd be like, what part don't you believe? And I'd take them to it. I'd take them on the timeline to it, I'd let them watch it, I'd give them the file, I'd zip it, send it to them, and they can scrutinise it all they want. And in that moment, because you know you've done it, you're bulletproof, aren't you? But no one does that, because most people who get called out for cheating are probably cheating. That's the thing, isn't it? Like, most people who get these inquiries into what they've done, they get very evasive, they get very quiet, don't they? They'll do the whole, why would I cheat? I'm so good, or all my friends watched me do it, they're all good, they know I don't cheat. They always go to these weak sauce excuses instead of actually validating what they've done. And of course, I wouldn't do what I'm just saying just then, guys, because I would never do that. I would never tell you that this was something that it wasn't. Because I just don't see the point, you know? And I came across this since the very beginning of YouTube. When I was first making walkthroughs, people used to say that I was doing them on different difficulties. They used to think that I was somehow editing around difficulties to make easy difficulties look harder. And I always found that really funny, because the time it would take to edit something like that, you could just beat the game on the difficulty that you said it was on and just do it right. So for me, as a player and as an editor, I don't see the point in doing all that extra work. But at the same time, I understand editing things that people perhaps don't think should be edited. And a big one for me is the example I used on my stream the other day, which is I did a Foxhound rank run on Metal Gear Solid 3. And it's a video that I really, really enjoyed. There's no commentary on it, but I put it up on YouTube. And I edited out a lot of the downtime so that you could just get a nice seamless experience. And the full run would have been about 2 hours and 15 minutes. But the video is about 1 hour and 48 minutes. That 20 minutes that's missing is not intended for you to think that I'm some fucking super fast speedrunner of Metal Gear Solid 3, because I'm not. That chunk that's been removed is all the parts where I'm skipping things and I'm removing weight. You know, it's meant to make it better to watch. And luckily for me, nobody gave me shit for that on that video. Nobody said anything. And additionally, I didn't put it into a pantheon where it would receive scrutiny. And I didn't do it under the guise of it being something crazy. Like just then, see that, guys? Single segment, right, boys? No, that's a checkpoint. And I must add this as well. This checkpoint here is really bad. It's super hard to link up the footage because they start you on a fight that doesn't happen like that. It's very strange. So I don't really know what's going on here, but this is a really, really difficult fight as well. The reason that this fight is hard is because the lower floor has a bunch of guys with guns. And I would get these crazy fights where I was doing all these weird combos on these fellas and bouncing off the walls and chasing them down and throwing air conditioning units at them. And then I would go down there and get shot, and it would put me back up here. And it got really frustrating too because I don't understand why they just spawn 5 dudes down here with guns and there's no checkpoint. It doesn't make much sense. So what you'll notice me doing here is I'm trying to bait them to run up by swinging across. And then when they do come up, I isolate them and beat them up. But they don't really want to move, so a lot of the times you just have to go down anyway. And this would be a really fun fight, this, if it wasn't for those guns. I love the environment, I love the arena. Like, I love the layers and the tiers to it, and I like that you can do a lot of creative stuff with the pillars. But instead, this just turns into Chris fights like a bit of a bitch for a while because he got shot a few times and got annoyed. And that's kind of the moral of all the difficult checkpoints in this game. It's a bunch of moments where you get shot after you fight for like 7 minutes and then you just get frustrated and you play really safe. And again, going back to what we've been talking about, if the checkpoints were better in moments like that, you wouldn't have to do that. You'd be able to get really, really super sick gameplay. And if you were cheating, you'd be able to segment it even more. And you'd be able to be honest about it and get something really awesome. And one of the person that I talk about a lot on this topic is a guy called Mike Cobb, who most of you, if you know my channel, you'll know this guy. He's one of the best God Hand players on YouTube, by a large margin. He's a very knowledgeable, very gifted player. But he's a player that wasn't truthful about what he used to make his videos. And he used save states. You know me, guys. I like save states. I think that they're useful tools for training. I think they're useful tools for fun runs. I think they're just useful tools in general. If you give me a game I love and you give me save states, I will love it twice as much because it lets me do what I want to do. But again, we have this problem with transparency and we have this problem with lying. And I don't know if Mike lied, I don't really know the full story, and I don't really care. But what I do know is it was never explicitly stated that he was curating his footage to such an extent by using a tool-assisted, essentially, stopwatch is what it was. He would get something really cool, he would pause or he would just press the save state, and then he would go from that moment, and then he would stitch them all together into this wonderful run. And I think that that's beautiful. I think that's art. I think that's great. But you've got to tell people. You can't just take the credit when you're making a patchwork quilt of your best moments. And that's the problem that he ran into amongst a whole host of other problems we won't talk about. But that right there is the issue, isn't it? Do you think anybody would have had a problem with that footage? Because let's face it, guys, I say this a lot as well. If you didn't realise that's what Mike was doing, I can't really help you. Because it's so obvious. Have you played God Hand? Then it's obvious. God Hand is a mean game. It is a game that beats the living shit out of you in every single moment. Didn't you think it was strange that when he streamed it, he didn't do the same stuff? Interesting that, isn't it? But here's the thing. Recently, there's been a cheater on Call of Duty by the name of Nadia. And she's somebody that blatantly uses aim assistance. And I'm not talking about aim assist that's built into the game. I'm talking about an additional software that is assisting her aim. And her aim doesn't miss. She does perfect tracking, pixel by pixel, reactive tracking to people's movements. And she always hits people in like the lower half of their torso. She never hits headshots. She never aims for the chest. She doesn't play like a player who's that good would play. She's an 8KD in Warzone, which is absurd. Her stats are unbelievable, and she promotes herself as the best Warzone player, or the best female Warzone player in the world. Activision invited her out with a bunch of other dudes, pro players, influencers, streamers, to go play the new Call of Duty at their event, and she went 4-16 or something on one of her first games. She got fucking decimated. Do you think the best female Warzone player in the world is going to go to a live event on the same engine, on the same settings, and get absolutely dominated? I don't think she's gonna, right? Because if she's as good as she claims she is, she should have been just fine. But if you watch the gameplay, guys, she looks like you passed the controller to your fucking nephew, and your nephew's not old enough to realise what anything is. She played like absolute dog shit. And she played like absolute dog shit because she's cheating with something that makes her look like a good player, right? That's not what Mike did. Those save states didn't make Mike a better player. He did. All he did was make it so that getting that awesome combination of clips took 1 hour instead of 20. That's all he did. And again, I'm not going to forgive it. I'm not going to forgive cheating. I'm not going to forgive any of that. I'm going to just give you my perspective on it. Mike didn't cheat to get better at God Hand. Mike used used a certain feature that people don't like to make his videos more spicy. And his biggest crime, in my mind, is he wasn't honest. And I don't know why. And again, I don't care. You're not going to change my opinions. You're not going to change how I think about him. I still think he's a great God Hand player. I think you should too. And I think his videos are amazing, regardless of if they're edited or spliced or whatever you want to say that he did or didn't do. However, Nadia is not a good player, and Nadia is a scumbag, because not only is she getting thousands upon thousands of dollars, because she's built an entire empire on her shitty fucking playstyle, but she's also using a cheat that anybody can use to do the same thing she's doing. So if we're going to really get into the, the nuance of cheating and tool assistance, it's not even created equal enough to compare those two people, because you can't compare them. You can't say that Nadia's like Mike. You can't. It's just not real. It's not true. When you turn off Nadia's cheats, she should have been able to play. And if she could, then we wouldn't even be talking about her in this tangent. But she couldn't. And that's the difference. If you watch Mike when he streamed, I only managed to catch a clip of it. It was a highlight, and I think it's deleted now. He could play, and you could tell. And there's a guy at this moment in time on YouTube I think he's called Crazy Boy. This dude is a cheater as well, but he's a cheater like Nadia. He's doing very suspicious stuff. Not only is he saying things are single segment when they're segmented, but I'm almost certain he's using save states, because you can see that his emulator is suffering, and a lot of the suffering looks like when you drop a save state. And then on top of that, there are instances where he gets hit, but he doesn't get hit. And I know God Hand pretty well. You might know that. You might not. I've played that game a decent amount to have a good understanding of some of the awkwardness and the weirdness that happens in it. I know when you're invincible and when you're not. I know how to do all the tech that manipulates invincibility frames to give you advantages in certain situations. I'm very aware of it. There are a few moments in his runs, his perfect runs, I might add, his perfect no damage speed runs, kick me sign hard difficulty, just contemplate that for a second, where he takes hits that you can't take. And there's another player by the name of Zena who's even scrutinised his run and pointed out one of the more blatant ones, because he's in charge of the speedrun leaderboards for that game on speedrun.com. So you have one of the most critical God Hand players who's currently active saying that your run is suspicious and that they won't put you on the leaderboards. And this guy's uploading these videos, and these videos are hitting the algorithm too. He's getting way more views than he deserves. And in this video, not only is this guy, in my mind, both cheating, lying, and probably doing even more fucking odd things, but he's also telling everybody that he is the, second best God Hand player in the world. Which I find fucking hilarious. But to me, it's kind of par for the course for God Hand, That game attracts a lot of interesting attention like that. Oh, watch this, by the way. You know how I said when sometimes Spiderman will go near some objects and it'll get all weird and fucky and it gets really hard to control the game? that was one of those moments. It didn't cost me though, thankfully, or maybe it did and I edited it out. But that player, if you've ever watched his videos, he knows a few things about God Hand. He's not bad, but he's not as good as he thinks he is, and he's not as good as he says he is either. And additionally, he plays like shit when it comes to creativity, and that's the thing that irks me most. Like, when you get better at God Hand, you start doing strange things on that game. You start really being creative. And that dude plays like he wants to play like Mike, but he doesn't have any of the creativity or any of the mind to make it fun to watch. So instead he does all the taunting, he does all the showmanship, but it's all empty because the playstyle's lame. And it's one of those fun things, isn't it, about watching God Hand? When you watch people play that game, it's very expressive. It's a big manifestation of your personality. And that guy's personality is lame and dog shit. So I don't really like that person's video. But then again, the most highest viewed video for God Hand on YouTube is a dude who is another cheater as well, which is, I forget the guy's name, is it like Shadow Surg or something like that? Which he's one of those channels that does no damage boss fights on a bunch of old retro games and new games, and then you watch them play like Dodon Patch and they don't even know how to use the laser. And I'm sorry guys, but you're not missing bosses on Dodon Patch if you don't know how to play that game. That's not how that works. But you know how you can no damage a boss in a shmup you've never learned the ability or earned the ability to play? By save stating. And then chaining the save states together. Which is what most of those people do. And those people do even worse things where they slow the fucking game down. They slow the game down in Cheat Engine, they play it, and then they speed it back up in the editing software. So they do impossible dodges where they go from left to right across the screen through bullets, and you just can't do it. The best players in the world can't do that, because if you're dodging like that, you're not a good player. There's some really famous quotes on shmups. I think one of them's by, is it Clover Tack? And if you know that name, you know that name. That guy said he'll watch gameplay of people doing crazy dodges, and then he'll critique them, because they should have never been there in the first place. And that's what high-level shmups are. High-level shmups aren't dodging bullets, guys. It's getting into the position where you don't need to. It's just like the fucking Matrix, you know? And it's interesting because I don't play them like that because I'm not very good. I like to dodge bullets. I will intentionally put myself in a shitty place just so I can have a big dick dodging bullets. And, you know, it's what I'm doing right here, isn't it? I could play Spiderman with all the abilities and all the crazy powers and all the crazy gadgets and absolutely destroy everybody. But I'm not going to do that because it's not who I am. I'm going to do it in a very specific, odd way, and I'm going to have a lot of fun doing it, and I'm going to talk over it for 2 hours, and hopefully you're going to watch it. And bringing this whole cheating sequence, you know, down into a nice and neatly tied bow. People will always cheat, especially when money's involved, especially when prestige is involved, and I don't think we'll ever get rid of cheating. However, I do think that there are certain cheats and certain methods of cheating that I can 100% understand. And I can 100% support. But it stems singularly and solely on the honesty of the person doing it. And I don't see any good excuse for not doing that. And I think of things like, I've tried to do a challenge run for Vanquish, where I went into the cheat engine on Vanquish and I tried to find the boost bar that slows down time, because I wanted to give hard difficulty the half boost bar that God Hard difficulty had, because I thought it would be really interesting being able to upgrade the weapons and do a hard mode run where you don't, you know, instantly melt out of cover unless you're using iframes and moving really well, so that you could see a bit more of Vanquish without it being so punishing and so mean. And I thought that sounded like a good idea. But in the end I couldn't make it work. And there might be a mod to do that now, this was a while ago. But that whole run would have been using cheat engine. And there would have been people that look at that as the same cheating as those people that are save stating in shmups. The same level of cheating as those people that are turning their hitboxes off in cheat engine. And I don't think that they're the same thing. And I think that that's the biggest problem, isn't it, at the moment? It's not that cheating's new. It's not that cheating's doing anything different or anything surprising. Cheating's doing what cheating has always done. The difference now is the honesty and the conversation around it. because people are blurring the lines on what cheating is, and it's coming across like all cheating is equal and equally as bad. And I can understand kind of a binary perspective on this, of you're either cheating or you're not. I love the simplicity and the idealistic nature of that perspective, but I think we can all agree that it's not that simple. And it's a much more complicated conversation. Which is why I don't think you'll ever really get to the point of conquering it. I don't think you'll ever get people to agree. But what you can do is, if you're honest, you can at least feel good about it yourself, and the people who think the same as you can find some common ground. Because it would be wonderful in an ideal world if we could change the names of these things, these features. It's interesting, isn't it, that they started their life as cheat codes and as these scripting tools that you can circumvent things with, and then they've somehow been bastardized and changed into what they are now, which is, people think when you cheat, everything is like wall hacks and aimbotting. They always immediately take it, you know, to multiplayer, competitive multiplayer. And of course, that's not every cheat, is it? Think about the people that hack leaderboards. Think about the people that do, you know, the stupid stuff, like the griefers that cheat just to frustrate everybody. You know, that's nonsense as well. How many times have you played a competitive multiplayer where you just can't kill some dude, and he's just wandering around being an arsehole, like teabagging? He's not even trying to win or trying to affect the game at all. He's just trying to make sure that you know he exists and be as annoying as possible. Which I think is kind of funny at the same time, but it's still cheating, isn't it? Yet, when you say cheating, they immediately think, oh, what has he done in Call of Duty? But what if we're not talking about Call of Duty? Interesting debate. Let me know what you think, guys. Where do you stand on it? Everybody I talk to with this has kind of got some commonalities, but then every so often there's some divergences there as well. And speaking of divergences, I promised to talk about the pacing issue that Spider-Man has, and we're not running out of time, but we're definitely getting towards some of the more interesting things I'm going to need to talk about, so I should probably speak about it now, in the middle of this wonderful stealth sequence. The Last of Us Part 2 is a terrible video game that I despise immensely. It's a game I dislike so much that I did not commentate the guide I put up on YouTube, because I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And I didn't want to talk about that game because I didn't think it was worth my voice, which sounds a little bit arrogant to say, but it's true. So I didn't, and it's been out a while now, and people's opinion on it is whatever people's opinion is. But there was one aspect of the game that I particularly did not like, and you'll notice it when you play it. Last of Us does this interesting two-step of, here's a sequence where you get to do something, i.e. stealth, survival, violence, action sequence, something that involves gameplay. And then the next level will be 100% walking simulator expositional dump as you do something completely fucking meaningless and tedious. And then the next level will be gameplay, shooting, driving, whatever it has you doing, you'll be doing it. And then the level after that, again, you will be walking somewhere doing something absolutely meaningless, absolutely brain-destroying, mind-numbing, borderline, like, catatonic state of what the fuck were they thinking. And the whole game does this. It does this interesting, like, waltz between action chapter, passive chapter, action chapter, passive chapter. And because that game is so long, it becomes quite noticeable that the pacing is affected by this, and the pacing in that game is really bad. And if you watch those videos I put up for it, you'll notice that I don't even have those chapters in between at all. I only pretty much have the even chapters, because those are the ones where the game demands you to do something. Everything else is 100% to forward the narrative, and the narrative isn't that strong in the game. I think it's terrible compared to the first game in every conceivable way. So I gave Last of Us Part 2 a lot of shit about that, and it's okay if you disagree. You might not see it that way. You might have enjoyed those intermission chapters. I didn't. But I felt that that framework is how you take anything exciting and you transform it into something mundane. Because the problem with that is all stories benefit from peaks and valleys. But do you know what they don't benefit from? A repetitive peak valley, peak valley, peak valley, peak valley. Because not only does it become linear and repetitive, but it becomes predictable. And when your story and the flow of your game becomes predictable, there's nothing you can do to keep your player engaged. It doesn't matter what you have them doing. It doesn't matter how good your graphics are. People are going to be bored. People are going to see the magic trip as it's happening instead of staring at the assistant. That was funny. Completely whiffed that and somehow didn't get spotted, luckily. One aspect of Spider-Man I find really confusing. You'll have to help me here, guys, because maybe there's a button and I never realised. But isn't it interesting that we seemingly can't, like, crouch walk quickly like Batman does? You know in Arkham when you hold one of the triggers and you do that sneaky walk and he walks really fast and then you take people down silently? What does Spider-Man have? Because in this game, when you want to sit in that Spider-Man pose, you have to click an analog in on an edge. You have to be on a lip, don't you? Like you're doing a certain trick in a Tony Hawk's game. It makes me kind of laugh that Spider-Man has that very iconic walk that he does up the buildings, but it seems really hard to do that on the ground, unless maybe you aim at it with the reticle and web towards it. Maybe you go on all fours then. But you'll have to tell me, guys, if there's a button to make him do that, because whenever I try to sneak up on people, I have to walk really slowly, hoping that I don't give myself away. And considering I'm meant to be this super agile, super quiet spider dude, it does seem really, really funny that I'm doing everything I can to walk silently like some old age pensioner. And again, it could be human error, guys. It's one of those things where because I don't pay too much attention to the stealth, I don't really look into it that much. This is a really good fight, this, by the way, but it has a really weird checkpoint, so you're going to see another one of those super odd transitions that I've had to use. And if you ever see a crossfade, guys, it means I couldn't link the footage correctly, so I did that to try and alleviate it. Just watch out for the rocket launcher, guys, and you'll be okay. And additionally, did you see just then, when I swung down and landed, did you see how much inertia or weird momentum I got as I landed and I slid? That happens a lot on high frame rate. Oh, watch this. This right here is everything about the environment ruining a fight. Like, this is a comedy of errors of everything not working. Although that looked kind of cool, that bit. But it's this bit here when this guy starts. Look at it. I can't get back to this dude. There's a guy firing rockets at me. I'm stuck in, like, this corner pocket. I'm trying to get off the walls and shit. I'm sticking to everything. Like, I'm running. Look at this. Look at this. I didn't want... Look at this. Dude. Ezio Auditori di Firenze. Absolute masterpiece of clinging to every fucking windowsill in sight. Beautiful piece of gameplay. Love it. So I think Last of Us had this zigzag pacing that kind of really hurt that game. And then I played a game called Guardians of the Galaxy. Guardians of the Galaxy, for me, is probably the worst game I've ever played in my entire life. It's worse than Last of Us Part 2. It's worse than, like, insert a game you don't like. It's so much worse than that. It is the death of everything good in video games and the celebration of everything that makes them mediocre and unsatisfying to play. I can't talk about that game, guys, because I hate it so much. And I streamed it. I streamed pretty much the whole thing, and it hurt me in every feasible way. You either know or you don't. But that game is so scripted, and so routine, and so rote, and so uninspired, and so just positively. If that's the future of video games, I'm going to just make music or write or like fucking learn an instrument or learn a language because I don't want to be there. This is a weird boss fight, this, guys, and I have no idea how you do this any quicker because every time I tried to overextend and be more aggressive against this guy, he just hit me. He just hit through what I was doing, he armored me, and he hit me with a shockwave, so... You want to jump on the wall when he does the vertical slash, and then you want to jump on the ceiling when he does the ground one. It's all very well telegraphed, and this seems like a concept where they wanted to make it be dynamic, and they wanted to make you guess, but they were too afraid to make it difficult, so instead they just made it long. But after this, we're going to be fighting him, I think, which should be fun. Or maybe we don't, maybe we go to a different level then. But Guardians of the Galaxy did the same thing that Last of Us did, only it made the gameplay feel like those levels in The Last of Us where nothing happened. So not only did we have, you know, level where you do something, exposition level, level where you do something, exposition level, but the levels where you did something felt worse than the exposition because the gameplay was so controlled, it was so just absolutely unbearably dull. And it had all the components to be something good. It had all the production, it had all the art and all the talent, and they'd made the worst, like, laziest AAA game ever made that wasn't even a game. It was like a fucking audiobook. It was an audiobook that should have never been a game. And I came up with all kinds of shit I used to say about that game, but it's been too long now and I forgot. So I really disliked it, because I thought it was going to be fun, and I'd heard all these things about how it had such a good story. Oh, by the way, guys, this is the hardest part of the game. This entire sequence coming up now is going to be big fight after big fight after big fight, and this first one is super awesome. However, you need to be aware here, Molotovs. These guys throw Molotovs, they're fucking silent, they have no telegraph, and they hit an area of effect. The best part is, someone can throw a Molotov at you, you can roll backwards, the Molotov can hit someone else, and the spray from it will land near you, and you'll still take damage. Like, it's so bad. The Molotovs ruin this game, and you're going to see them a ton in this sequence, so get used to it. The fight after this was the fight that took me the longest. I was here for about a good 40 minutes, and this is about a 6 to 7 minute fight. It feels like a goddamn eternity, the one coming up. As soon as you kill everybody here, I'm going to web shoot towards a balcony with a guy with a rocket launcher, and that's when the fun begins. This is it here. So the first thing I noticed on this guy is if you angle that wall jump, you can knock him off and you don't have to contend with him because you can just... he webs himself because Spider-Man doesn't kill. He's a good boy. And then when you get to this, the idea is pretty simple. There is lots of spawns, lots of grenades, lots of Molotovs, and then lots of guns. And you want to focus on the dudes that have armor, and there's also fire on the ground from the Molotovs, so be very careful. But isolate anybody wearing body armor with a gun. Get rid of those guys first. Then once that's done, focus on cleaning up all the stragglers. There's easily about 30 dudes on this sequence, and maybe 10 of them have guns, and the guns at any moment can just one-frame you if they want to. You're going to see me play this incredibly strategic, and it's the same thing I did the last time I was here on the other project. This fight's checkpoint is so shit that you have to take it really, really carefully, unless you're just a super aggro beast. And for me, guys, I had rounds where I was doing really well, I was on everyone's ass, I was beating the living shit out of them, and then I just get bop, Molotov on my head. Bop, get shot from behind. Somebody fires a rocket, it doesn't hit me, but it hits someone else, and the splash damage hits me. Like, the amount of just like, look at that. Fucky stupid nonsense happened on this fight. It was off the charts. And it's a shame, too, because I love this encounter. I love the environment. And I love the idea of getting in the middle of a prison riot, but it makes that time-tested mistake if it has two forces fighting, and as soon as you show up, they all fight you. And I just... in video games now, programming has got so good, that shouldn't happen. Like, the guys with the guns should be shooting at the police. They shouldn't just immediately see you and then turn into fucking Hawkeye, but they do. And it's bad, and you're going to see it in this. So you're going to see me doing a whole host of weird things to try and keep myself occupied, because the amount of times I had to reset, it probably was only about 10 to 15 resets, but it's enough. And it's not fun, guys. Most of this project was an absolute blessing, but this was a pain in my ass. But anyhow, back to the sawtooth game design. So I played Guardians of the Galaxy, and I hated it on so many levels you can't even begin to understand how much I hated it. And the worst part is I only played it because it was on Game Pass and I wanted to get my money's worth of that terrible service. So we have Last of Us with this interesting game design, which I do not like. We have Guardians taking that and running with that, calling it a feature, and everybody saying it was great. And then I came back to this game and been like, yeah, Spider-Man. At least Spider-Man's a good game, you know? We're not going to have any of that stupid shit I was talking about with Spider-Man. And then it hit me. Spider-Man might have done that shit before Last of Us did. Because think about it, guys, right? Think about the start of the game. Start of the game, you watch this cutscene you can't skip. We're already on to a good start. And then you swing all the way through the town with some song in the background. And then you do a couple of fights up a tower, leading to a boss fight that leads to tutorialization of open world mechanics you're probably not going to mess with unless you really, really want to play the game, which you'll do it once and then you'll never do it again. And then they make you go to a weird, like, soup kitchen or something. I don't know what it is, I can't remember. But they make you go to a place where there's a bunch of down and out people who need help. And then you go there and do community service. So, see how that works? Level with something happening. Level with nothing happening. Furthering a story that's not that interesting. And then the next level, you're Spider-Man again. And then you go and you do something fancy. You go and fight some gangs, you go and do this, you go and do that. You're like, this game is great, I love swinging around, I love fighting, I love being Spider-Man. And then what's the next thing that happens? Mary Jane has to look around a fucking warehouse and you're walking around as a character you don't want to be. And there's fail states like Splinter Cell 1. And you're solving weird puzzles involving statues and like weird phallical gold symbols. And it's just like, what am I fucking doing? This is not Spider-Man, I don't want to do it. And then the next level, you're Spider-Man again. Doing something cool, building sites this, building sites that. Fun times, right? This whole game is the exact same thing The Last of Us did. The only difference here is, it's so much more painful because when you play as Spider-Man and you're doing Spider-Man things like what you're watching right now, the game is awesome. And it leads me to a huge amount of trepidation. And this is not me saying, guys, that you can't have a downtown level, that you can't have, you know, a moment in a game that is not balls to the wall fighting. It doesn't mean that you can't try to forward your exposition and do it in a way that makes sense, that's grounded in the world and grounded in your characters. I don't mind that. What I do mind is having to suffer it on repeat playthroughs. And that's the true problem, isn't it? The true problem isn't that it exists. The true problem is they've turned it into gameplay now. Back in the old days, those levels would have been cutscenes, and you would have held start button and skipped them, and got back to playing as Spider-Man. But we've turned the part that you skip on a second playthrough into the part that you cannot skip on a second playthrough. And then when you compound that with Spider-Man's inability, this was weird, to want to give you any way of replaying the missions, there's nothing you can do other than play the game again. And every time you play this game, you have to suffer those odd missions where nothing happens and no gameplay is to be found. And it's not an issue the first time. The first time it's fine, you know, it's like a finger up your ass at the doctor's. You didn't see it coming, even when he put the glove on. Maybe he was going to do something with something else. But before you knew it, he was inside you, and you were joined at the wrist. And then afterwards you swore to never speak about it, and yet I've just brought it up and those memories made you shiver. First time was fine, there was ignorance. Second time, he reaches for that glove, you're already out the fucking door, you're in the car, you're doing 90 on the motorway. It's different. First time's fine. Second time's not. And that's the problem that modern gaming is facing now, because it's everywhere. We are turning something that was already very average and suffered often into something that is suffered eternally. And I don't understand why. This game has the ability to skip the puzzles. The puzzles! I think those puzzles are more interesting than the bits you can't skip. How does that make sense? This is interesting too. I wanted to experiment with this guy here to see if there was enough objects in this environment to throw at him to kill him. If you don't attack him after you throw objects at him, this guy's going to be around forever. He's so beefy, dude. This guy is so tanky. And it keeps telling me to use my suit upgrades as well, which is really funny. But there's checkpoints on these parts, so these parts are absolutely fine. You won't remember these at all. But you might be wondering, guys, you know, we get the idea of the no gameplay then gameplay thing being kind of annoying to replay and to repeat. We didn't come across it because we only beat it once. We got the platinum and we really loved it. You know, we get that. We get the idea of it, but why does it resonate so much? The reason that to me, it's such a damning precedent to set is because games like this are driving the industry. This is a AAA game. This is a game that people think very fondly of. And it doesn't matter if that player's played it for 5 minutes or for 500 hours. You ask people about Spider-Man, they say great game. You ask people about Insomniac, they say great developer. Why would you not want to make your game like Spider-Man? Spider-Man did really well. Spider-Man's a really fun game. Insomniac are a really good team. Why wouldn't you want any of these things to be? It seems like an easy thing to happen, right? It seems like a no-brainer. I don't want people to copy this game. I don't. Because to me, it's such a bad direction to take video games because it's taking the control out of the player's hands and it's forcing a very specific playstyle on every player. You'll have those narrative people that play Telltale games that want to skip the combat. Like, look at... Why, see that? That right there, guys. If I'd have committed to that web, I would have taken damage off the fire then. Because that Molotov throw that shouldn't have existed. But, like, look at Darkside Phil. Another fight here, guys. This fight's amazing, but all that fire on the ground will hurt you. And the amount of times I was doing this, I was kicking ass, I was getting a giant combo, and I stepped in fire. Please don't put environmental fire like this needlessly. It's so stupid. Great fight, though. Really, really love this room. You can also go into the balconies here and get a weird second spawn. It throws the whole thing off, though, so I don't recommend doing it. But this is awesome. What a great piece of gameplay. I'm complaining that this game has these moments with no gameplay, but when you hit this prison, you're in for it, dude. And I adore it. But, like, look at Darkside Phil. Darkside Phil runs past all the enemies in Halo and then complains that the game lets you do it. And then he goes on to use it as a mental gymnastic to say that Halo's gameplay is boring. I don't know anybody that likes Halo that thinks its gameplay is boring. I don't. Because Halo's not boring. I don't like Halo, and I don't think Halo's boring. You know? It's one of those things. It's really, really silly to me that somebody can do that. And what Phil does when he plays games, he's been going back to Uncharted, he's been going back to Evil Within. And every time he plays these games, he said, this game's not very good, it hasn't aged very well, it's just a grind. And every time this happens, he's playing the game. He's shooting the bad guys. Every time the game makes him use the mechanics, Phil complains that it's antiquated. And I'm almost at the belief now that that's because so many modern games make you sit and watch a bunch of shit, so he can do all his tips and all his begging and all his bullshit. And then you do a little bit of gameplay, and then you watch a bunch of shit, then you do a little bit of gameplay, and you watch a bunch of shit. I'm beginning to think it's the industry that's got him to that point where he is in such dire straits when he has to do more than 2 minutes of gameplay. And for me, I've gone the opposite way. I love the moments where the game wants me to play it because I'm so sick of not playing games. I'm so sick of watching games I want to play. And to me, there's no excuse for it. It doesn't add to anything. The only thing it does is hurt. And the reason it hurts is evidenced coming up later on in this video. There's one part of this game, guys, that I wanted to re-record. There's one part of this game I did re-record because I was able to use a trainer to get to it really quickly. I thought this game would have mission select because it's been like 4 years or whatever. I thought they would have added it because I thought it was a no-brainer. We got photo mode, guys. So you can zoom in on Peter's bulge and get the perfect chromatic aberration on the throb of the right side of his cockhead, but you can't replay any fucking missions. You can't do it. So I had a capture problem with OBS on a mission coming up. One of the hardest missions in the game. You know, it's never the missions where you're walking around listening to Aunt Sue tell you about fucking crackers when you get capture problems. It's always the hardest part of the game. And I wasn't happy with the footage because of it. So I was going to re-record it so I could be happy with it. And I continued the game, and I finished recording the game, and I went to go back, and I couldn't do it. So the only way to re-record that footage again to get something I like is to play 90% of a game where 60% of the game I'm not doing something I want to do. And I can't skip it because I have to walk to those cafes. I have to investigate that FEMA camp. I have to constantly play as Mary Jane doing like sundries in weird fucking places and messing around with holograms. And I can't face doing it again. So I didn't. And it makes me mad, that. And that's the reason, probably the motivation for this entire tangent and for this entire bile that's driven towards this weird framing of the game and this weird checkpoint syndrome and this weird inability to let people replay your game when your game is great. It's just the accoutrements that suck. And this is one of the hardest missions in the game that I'm happy to say I got on second attempt. And I got it on second attempt because the tech I learned the first time I did this. So the idea here is there are a bunch of these cores littered around these apartments that you have to destroy. And to destroy them, you shoot them with your web. The problem is there are so many guns and there's so many snipers, and the snipers work different to the guns, guys. The sniper is just 100% hit scan. So what happens is if he's on you and he shoots, no matter how fast you move, He will always hit you, even if you're in front of his laser. I have footage of me moving at maximum speed, and his laser is about 4 meters behind me, and he's hitting me perfectly on the dome every bullet. And he kills you in, like, I think it's 2-3 hits. It's really quick. You do not want to get hit. And you'll notice that I'm doing that aerial dodge move a lot whenever the laser's near me. It's just the safest thing to do to try and stop the guns. We're coming up on, after this fight, is the most broken fight in the game and the hardest fight in the game to no damage because the systems do not work. And the problem with this encounter that we have after this one, because you won't see the problems I'm talking about, unless you've done it, you might not know it exists. But I said the same thing in my previous walkthrough, and I'm going to say the same thing in this one. Whatever's happening with the scripting on that fight, it is completely different. It's aberrant compared to the scripting on the rest of the game. And it's this fight right here, guys. This might not look like much, but the guns break the dimension of reality here. They play by their own rules. It doesn't matter how you dodge, it doesn't matter what you dodge, it doesn't matter when you dodge, it doesn't really matter about you. It's 100% up to the game and whether or not it wants to rob you. And I can't even begin to tell you how frustrating this encounter is. This, to me, is probably the worst part of any of these games. Like any of the superhero games I've played, any of the games that have the Arkham-inspired combat, this is the worst. Because it takes something that's worked the whole game, and it just stops working. And the hilarious part is it looks easy. It really does. It looks effortless. It looks like I'm just flying around throwing shit at people. It looks like I'm just being super mobile and I'm just hanging around. Nothing here is of note or even remotely dangerous or challenging, but you can lose in a second and it's not up to you. Because the guys with the guns here, I think there's some kind of programming on this sequence where when 3 people aim at you at the same time, one of them doesn't get the telegraph. Because when those guys get out of the car at the start, one of them doesn't telegraph and he just shoots you. And even when you're dodging, he still hits you. And then the best part about this fight, which I learnt the hard way, is the police can hit you too. So do you see how the police are having a gunfight with the criminals? If you overextend and get unlucky in this sequence, you get hit by your allies. And this happens later on as well, because there's a fight after this where I got hit twice by the police trying to support me while I was beating up the prisoners. And I don't want to tell these people how to make their game, but I'm fucking gonna. Because I don't know about you folks, but you should never, and I repeat, never, you should never get hit by friendly fire from the CPU. I can understand when you're playing a cooperative game with a friend and your buddy shoots you. I can understand that. That's human error. That's an argument waiting to ruin a friendship is what that is. But the CPU is too perfect to shoot you. It's nonsense. And the fact that that exists just makes me sad. And this is all leading, all of these tangents, guys, it's all leading to my hopes for Miles Morales. Because it's been announced for PC, and it's coming out in the fall, which is nice and vague. And I can't wait for that game. Because all of my problems with Spider-Man, I want that game to fix. But I don't know if it will, and I don't know if it did. So you guys will find out when I cover it, because this project is meant to be kind of a throughway to that project when it comes out. Because it's going to come out in the next month, I think, at some point. And I'm going to cover it in... I might do a different way that I've done this, because I don't know the game and because it's new. I don't know if I'll do a super can't use anything, don't have any fun kind of run. Which, that's not to say I didn't have fun, guys. I had a lot of fun with this, actually, coming here and doing this. And I had even more fun, because there's a lot of people on my first project that didn't think I'd be able to do it. And that's always delightful, isn't it? You know, when you get to do something that people think can't be done. Because they were mentioning that the heavies can't be webbed. I don't know how you're going to beat them. And it turns out you just beat the shit out of them instead. And then they go down like all the rest. But there's a great motivation in people saying something is impossible or that something cannot be done. Especially when it's personal. When they say you can't do it. It's a wonderful motivator. And with Miles Morales, I've heard that there are these new moves. They're called like Venom moves or something, which is a little bit confusing because it made me think of the symbiote Venom, but it turns out it's nothing to do with that. That looked cool as hell. I love it when things sync up like that. Just kick him in the face into the garbage bags. That was so nice. And you have this ability to augment your moves with that character, which I think sounds pretty cool. And I'm going to see how that works. And hopefully I can make the combat really interesting with some of the different gadgets and whatnot. And I'll do a standard walkthrough on the hardest difficulty. I'll probably maybe do no damage again, something like that, to make it a bit more interesting. I could maybe keep my combo bar up the whole fight, something like that, if it's a little bit too easy. But because I don't know the game, I don't want to overextend and overpromise, because I am very aware of my abilities on video games, and I'm very aware of my ability for patience with certain things. So when it comes to doing something like this, I have a lot of patience, because I like the game. The area where my patience waned is after this fight on that sequence where OBS knew I was having a bad time and decided to ruin the guide. It is interesting watching me throw stuff at these dudes. I love these fights though. In as much as the police being able to shoot you is really shitty, I love being in the streets. I love being with all the cars. I just think it's such a good moment. This game really escalates in its final quarter. It's nothing but awesome boss fights, awesome fights, and shitty checkpoints. And this is it, guys. This is the shitty checkpoint. This is it. Into the fire. Take out the RPGs on the roof. This, to me, is just like Evil Within Chapter 5, the 2 rooms. Chapter 6, sorry. Why there's no checkpoint, I'll never understand. It doesn't make any sense to me. And what I'm doing here is, because this is segmented, I've got 2 different pieces of footage that are linked on this. Because what happens, guys, is you take out 2 of the 4 roofs and it spawns a new enemy that traps you in a cutscene, and then you have all the roofs you didn't take out and they're now being assailed by these special police officers. And this special... they're not police officers, are they? They are police. They're like some kind of special forces. I forget the story, guys. Somebody probably knows. It's that girl with the gun who's in the DLC. It's her forces, isn't it? They turn up and they start having a bit of a civil war. The problem is, when you turn up, they all start shooting you. And there's no checkpoint. And you get shot really quickly here. So this is a really, really punishing sequence, because you have to constantly clear these roofs. But after this, you'll notice I'm on a different roof. Do you see that? The reason for that is I recommend to you guys to clear the bigger roof first. Clear both the bigger roofs and then save the easier roofs for after the cutscene, because that way you will have done all the hard work and then all the stress will be less. That's what I would recommend. I didn't do that on my run that actually was successful, so I've cut that footage together of me clearing the better roof, and then this is the successful run where I don't clear the better roofs and I have to deal with them. And the reason I've done this is because it's just better. And it's better for you guys if you're struggling. This is hard because these flying guys either go down really quickly or just linger around like dickheads and shoot you. And the best way to beat them up is to get close to them and start webbing them between your combos. And as soon as you web them enough, you can either grab them and slam them into the ground, or you'll be near a building and they'll get stuck to a wall. And what I like to do is I like to press Y to get to them. I like to punch them once, web, punch them again, or chase them with Y if they try to get away, web again, and then at that point you should be able to maybe hold Y and slam them down, or knock them into a wall and get them stuck. And if you do it correctly, which you'll see later on in this fight, you can kill them really quick. You can kill them in seconds. But sometimes they're really, really evasive and really annoying. And because they shoot you so quickly, it's really easy to get hit. But that right there, that's perfect. What I did to him is what you want to do to all of them. But if you get hit here, guys, you go back to that very first roof and you have 4 roofs to clear again. And then it triggers the cutscene and then these guys turn up. And it's really annoying. One way you can do, which might be worthwhile if you've got the patience or if you're using upgrades so it's not as frustrating as it was for me. If you kill everybody on the first roof and then you kill everybody but one guy on each of the remaining roofs, then when you trip the cutscene, there's only 2 felons left and it's just the flying guys. That might be the easiest way to save yourself some, brain effort. But this dude, when they want to be evasive, they get so annoying. And because that guy's shooting at us right now, I'm terrified he's going to hit me. And this run's gone really good up to this point, and I don't want to see it jeopardized by some stupid guy with a gun. And they've all got guns, so everyone's a stupid guy with a gun on this part. But I'm trying to pull him towards myself, and he keeps trying to whip me. This should not be one of the hardest parts of the game, but it is. On this run, this caused me actual rage. And I don't really rage when I'm doing, like, projects for YouTube. I shout sometimes when I get fucked by something that I believe to be unfair. But the encounter before this with the broken guns, that made me actually bang my desk and shout. And this one made me shout too. And it's unfortunate because I don't think either of those fights are the hardest fights in the game. It's just the situations that they put you in. The circumstances make those fights bad. If the guns worked on that other fight, you'd never remember it. If this had a checkpoint between that cutscene, it would just be a good fight. It would just be a fun time on the roofs. But as it stands out as a huge difficulty spike. You can web these guys on the edge of this roof as well if you get cheeky here. You can stand on the lip and you can web that guy enough and he'll just get stuck on the other side of the roof if you watch. If you get him to fall off, he just gets vacuumed in. I did this on one of the runs that wasn't successful. But again, you're up against the regen of your abilities here, because the web shooter takes forever to come back. And it takes a full, I think it's a full 6 pulses to put people down. I hope I can show you this though, so you can see it if you've never seen it. And again, guys, you've seen me play now for an hour and 40 minutes. Have you seen me play like this? You've never seen me play like this, right? The only part was in the prison, because the checkpoint was bad. This is the same thing. If this is really good here, guys, you can bait them down onto this roof, and you can stick them to this wall. But this is where OBS froze. And I had to stop OBS, and restart OBS, and then it wouldn't capture for like 5 minutes. And by the time I was back in the game, I was terrified I was going to fuck it up. Luckily, I only lost like 15 seconds, and I could sink it from this roof here. But if you bait one of them down, he's coming now, all you do is you web him, and then depending on what he does, sometimes you can even web him against that roof. But this is going not as good as I wanted it to. He's been a dickhead. But you can't get shot here unless it's by him. There it is, boom. So that wasn't as good as it could have been, but if you get lucky, you can web him a ton and then zoom towards him and he won't do those bombs and then you'll just stick him to the wall. And the scary part is here, trying to get these guys to get the attention of the flying dudes instead of the guys with the guns that are all shooting at me now with rockets. And if you had the upgrades, you could just fire the rockets back at these fellas and they'd be absolutely fine and you get rid of them really quickly. But there's a random guy over there with a pistol too, and he's a bit of a problem, because if he decides to murk you, it's really frustrating. But this is it now. If we get rid of these 4 enemies, we've done it. And that's the hardest part of the game done. But nothing's that easy. So many guns. I'm just trying to be as cheeky as I can to try and get his attention, but if he puts that laser on you, it gets really scary. So, is he coming? Watch the map here as well. You can see him on the map when he comes. So you zap him a bunch. See that? There, perfect, right? See that? That was perfect. And that transition, OBS, being a cunt. Luckily, though, we got a super aggro flying guy, and I think there's only the one dude left with a gun. But this is the fight that I was really unhappy with, and I would like to have re-recorded, and the game didn't give me the capacity to do it. And I thought it was really beautiful as well, because that fight took like 20-30 minutes of frustration and shit, and I wanted to re-record it. And this is the very next mission where you take 2 bosses on at the same time, and this is a 1 attempt. And it's funny too, because this fight is quite messy, because I'd not done this fight since my previous walkthrough. But what I did know is that this is a really well balanced encounter, and if you know what you're doing, you can control both of these guys, and it's just really fun. And I think this is probably one of the best like AAA boss fights ever made. It's very scripted, it's quite simplistic, but it makes you feel awesome, and it makes it feel like the scale and the scope of it is way larger than it is. And all you're really doing is waiting for him to stop, webbing him, pressing Y, and then beating him up. And when you get close to him, you can beat him up and then web him again, and then Y, and then beat him up and then web him again, and then Y, and he can't move. He can't do anything, and this is all skill. This has nothing to do with like shitty checkpoints, nothing to do with guns not working and detection being bad. This is 100% player ability and game knowledge, and if you've got it, you can embarrass this guy, even with no upgrades, even with no gadgets. And then when Shocker gets involved, he's the same. The only difference there is you just have to shoot some of the things that he's messing around with, and then you can stick him and then beat him up too, and then this guy will attack you a little bit. But it's so balanced and it's so fun. I really like this fight. And it really hurts for me to tell you that the gank fight after this against Scorpion and RINO is nowhere near as good as this. Because I thought it was, and then I played it on this difficulty. And here's what makes it so interesting. So, Shocker and VULTURE both have a common weakness, which is you web them into Y, and then you can do some serious like looping and whatnot. And as long as you can watch two things at once, like just then, you can dodge when that guy decides to shoot at you. These guys both have like very understandable weaknesses, and you can overcome them by just being aware. When you take on Scorpion and RINO, originally in my first no damage run, my strategy was to get rid of Scorpion. Isolate Scorpion, shut him down, and then just take on RINO, because RINO's like the easiest one. He's tanky though, but he's easy. On ultimate difficulty, you can't web you can't web Scorpion and knock him off like you do, because you don't have enough web to do it. So when you hit him with the full 6 charges, he doesn't fall off the container. And then when you regen like 1 or 2 charges and you web him again, he still doesn't fall. So it completely flips the fight on its head. And instead of going for the weaker link, which used to be Scorpion for me, I had to go for RINO. And fighting RINO while Scorpion is attacking you the whole time is a completely different experience, and it's a lot more difficult. And it's only difficult because the game doesn't work that well. And there's so many moments where weird things happen and you get the wrong stuff and you get odd detection. Like there's a particular one where when RINO runs underneath the cranes, the game does this slow motion effect to give you an assist to tell you to pull the crane. Sometimes it doesn't do that, so he just runs through it and you wait for it and you just get hit in the face. And then there's these odd things I noticed when I was doing it, because I was on it way longer than I intended to be. So you notice that, you know that area where you can pull the cargo crate down, and it's not like pulling it off a machine, it's just pulling it off a stack of crates? If you do it to him when he's on the complete opposite side of the crate, not the side the crate falls on, the side it could have fell on if it went the other way, it counts as if it did. So you can hit the bosses with crates on the complete opposite side of where they fell. There's all kinds of weird shit going on in that fight, and I had no idea until I came back and did it for this. And that's one of the cool things about doing a walkthrough, guys, doing something so specific. You will learn things about the game you didn't know existed, because things will work differently, and you'll have to lean on different things to succeed. And if you've watched this thus far, wondering why would you do a project like this, it doesn't sound very fun. The fun is in not having all the things, you know? Some people will look at this, a little bit like Under the Mayo and his penchants for playing games in the most miserable way you can and then complaining that the game never told him to do anything. Like, that's just bizarre, isn't it? And that was bizarre too. Speaking of bizarre, we had another one of those weird interactions in Spiderman where it doesn't even feel like you're attacking the enemy in front of you and he's just doing weird things. But this is the hallucination of Scorpion, and you just have to web him and then you can go and beat him up a little bit. Just be careful here because they can shoot at you off screen. There's a decent amount of off-screen shootery that happens, but it's nothing too bad. He does try his best to get on screen, but he more often than not just jizzes on you regardless. But I do hope that when people watch things like this, or if you've watched any of the stuff, that was weird as well. If you watch any of the stuff on my channel, that you don't watch it and think, well, he's just playing this game in the most miserable way he can, and that's the reason why he doesn't enjoy it. A lot of people sometimes confuse my criticisms for me not liking something, because they're so used to the YouTubers that do nothing but say everything's amazing. You see, to me, I'm more interested in critiquing things. I'm more interested in what's wrong and why it went wrong than I am what's right with it in many ways, because I think games do a lot of good, and I think it's the stuff that carries most of them. But it's in the bad and in the nuance of the bad where my personal perspective comes alive. And I only really critique games that I really like. I shit on games I dislike, you know, I just, like I did earlier on with Last of Us and with Guardians of the Galaxy, like, those games to me are dog shit, they're just horrible, I don't know why you'd play them. To me, I would rather not play games again than play those games ever again. That's how strong I feel about that. And I don't really analyse them, I don't really get too deep into games like that, because to me I just don't see the point. The start bit here, something interesting happens, which you'll notice. You can get Scorpion to shoot his projectile into RINO, and it will hit him, and it will stun him. You can also put RINO between you and Scorpion, so that he always blocks the shots from our friend over there. But this fight is so different, and you need to be careful here too. When you hit RINO and it goes through him like that, the moment you swing on RINO and you don't get any detection, that means you have to move. Because if you don't, he will auto-counter your attack, and he just hits you for free, and you can't really seem to do anything about it. I was coming up with all kinds of ways to lock this dude down and do tons of damage, but as you can see, Scorpion will not let you do proper combos on his friend. He just constantly dive bombs you the whole time. And this is really interesting, this. I recommend you try this if you've never done it. I've never fought this boss like this. I used to think this boss was fair and easy and just worked just fine. I thought it was as good as Shocker and Vulture. It's not. Like, you get weird shit in this fight all the time, and the worst part is they have so much HP on this run that you have to beat the living piss out of them. Like, I did not expect to have to hit these guys this much. I actually thought that maybe you couldn't do this. When I was attacking Scorpion and I couldn't stun him, I was beginning to think that maybe it was an impossible task on this particular challenge run, but I can confirm, you can do this. He just takes a ton of web to go down, and when he goes down, you've won, it seems. But that move there, it's 2 hits very close together, then he delays and he does a final hit. So you just do roll, roll, wait a second, then you roll. Very, very easy. It has weird detection though, and it's active for a long time, so you can get caught in it if you're not careful. I do not recommend mashing though. Mashing can save you, but it might also get you jacked up. But that's that slow motion when you can do things to RINO. I think this... Is this the end of him? I think this might be the end of him. Yeah, it is. So now, it's the 1v1. And this is the point where I was kind of like, what do I do? I don't really know how I'm supposed to do this. So I'm waiting for my web to come back. 1 dodge, 2 dodge, delayed dodge. Web, 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 web. And then at this moment, I am kind of in a little crisis as to... This might be impossible. And it's not difficult, but it's not cool to feel like you're not hurting a boss. It takes you back to being a kid when you played Resident Evil, and you didn't know if they were in iframes, so you just wasted all your ammo on face transitions instead of when you could kill them, and that's it right there. So whatever you do, all that web you put on him, when you Y him, you then beat him up, and then I think this is the end of him. So you kick him right in the helmet, and that's the end of the fight. But it was looking a little dicey up until that point, and I'm really glad that I could share the rest of this with you, because this fight is actually pretty hard. The fight after this, when the flying guys turn up. And this is interesting, because I was really worried about this encounter, because I remember it being frustrating on my first project. But compared to that rooftop checkpoint not being there, and compared to the broken guns, this was really fun. Because I knew that I didn't have to do those other shitty fights again, even though at this point I was still thinking about re-recording the roof until I realised I couldn't. And it's probably going to linger that and be with me for a while, because I would have really liked to have done that again. And I don't like feeling like that about guides. I feel like that about a few of the walkthroughs I've done. I feel like that when it comes to Castlevania Lords of Shadow. I feel like that when it comes to Red Faction Armageddon. I've actually looked at Red Faction Armageddon on PC, but it has really, really bad mouse acceleration. Which is super frustrating, because I bet that game would be fun on PC. I've looked at it in a few guides where weird stuff like that's happened. Like, I really don't like what happened to my Arkham Knight guide. I always wanted to go back and do that again, because I really liked that game. But my audience at the time... A lot of people were very critical on Arkham Knight. And it'll be interesting to see how it gets remembered, that game, because it had a really bad PC port. What they did to the PC port was inexcusable. Then there was all the controversy over the Batmobile. But I still think that that game is absolutely phenomenal. It is by far, for combat, for the actual gameplay, it is by far my favourite superhero game. It's not my favourite Arkham game, funnily enough, because I think the Arkham Asylum is a masterpiece, as you've probably heard if you've watched that video. But when it comes to fighting, if I'm going to play an Arkham game for fighting, it's not going to be Asylum. And that's what makes me so excited about Miles, too. Because I just want them to do things differently. And I don't care too much about the unbridled black spirit of youth, or whatever that stupid quote was that journalist used to show him jumping off the roof. You know, I mean, it's funny, isn't it, that the thing that people remember most about that game is what some idiot said when he reviewed it. And he made it about race for no reason whatsoever. Is Miles black and Peter white? Yes. Yeah, that's how that works. But does him jumping off the roof have anything to do with his culture? I just don't see that. Well, unless, like, unless he did some incredibly specific tribal dance, which I don't see him doing, jumping off a roof. I think that they just twisted the animation to give it an interesting look, to make it a little bit different. Because that's what flair is, isn't it? That's personality. And that's what I'm looking forward to playing with in that game. I'm looking forward to seeing his combo. I'm looking forward to seeing all the deviations of what you can do to link things together. I'm looking to see what they've added to spice it up a little bit. Because it is technically a sequel, isn't it? But it seems like the marketing on that game is a little bit confusing. You could look at it as a standalone DLC, but at the same time, they tried to make out that it was a full game, and then there's those people that say that it plays just like a bit of a DLC or like a Christmas special or something, and it becomes interesting then, doesn't it? Where do you draw the line? What is something and what is something else? What constitutes a sequel? By the way, guys, that move just then is my favourite move in the game, and you'll never see me do it. It's so goddamn good. Did you see that? He does a Vegeta hammer slam with both his fists, and I love it. And I figured it out on this, that at the beginning, when you're loading in, if you mash Y, you do a stealth attack on him. And you kill him instantly. That's what that was. The reason you don't see that move, guys, is because he knows I'm there. If he didn't know I was there, I would do triangle, and when you attack him, you just beat him into the ground, and it's a one-hit kill. Sadly, you can only do it on that very opening spawn, and if you wait too long, he's aware of you, and it doesn't work. So if you want to do what I did just then, or if you're playing, and you're like, hang on a second, my game doesn't do that. How did you do that? It's just because I'm attacking the frame the game lets me do it. And it's not precise or anything. It's not like I'm timing it like some crazy speedrunner trick. I'm just mashing Y when it's fading in. And this fight's really, really easy to fuck up to. There are so many guns here, but look at how many guns I'm dodging. Look at all the guns I'm dodging, and then imagine an encounter where there's like 5 guns, and every time I dodge, they hit me anyway. That's why that one sequence in the game is so busted. Because these enemies are shooting me every opportunity, and everyone has a gun. And I'm not being hit. And all I'm doing, guys, is I'm pressing B. I'm pressing B once, I'm not getting hit. You notice that? Functioning game. How the game should be. That is not how that fight that I talked about earlier is. It simply is not. And when the game works, it's not too bad, you know? Look, just dodge. Easy life. Like, I'm decimating these people. Absolutely embarrassing them. No upgrades, no items, no gadgets, no specials, none of that stuff. 100% the exact same Spider-Man that started the game, and I'm clowning on them. And now we have the boss fight against this dude. Defeat Lee. This is another interesting boss fight, this, where you spend a decent chunk of it wondering if you're doing it wrong. I think that's an interesting thing to talk about, that. Do you ever think you should believe yourself to be doing something wrong in a video game? Is that a failure of the developers, that the feedback is not accurate enough to tell you that it's working? Because in this game, one way to fight it would be to have life bars. For some reason, the game didn't want life bars because it's more exciting when you don't know, right? Some people think that. I really like boss life bars, but I also really dislike doing small damage to bosses. And I feel like in a game such as this, it's the same thing that would have happened in God of War. When you challenge run God of War, and you do no upgrades, or you do stuff like Pain Plus, or something really brutal, you hit bosses a lot. They take a considerable amount of damage. If they had a life bar, you would probably be doing millimeters worth of damage on every hit. do you really want to feel like a hero doing millimeters of damage to a boss? Because this is the problem, isn't it? Ooh, that was weird. I was thinking about restarting then. It's interesting, you've seen me pause now twice. There's been 2 pauses in the game. And both of them have been moments where I've been like, should I restart? Now let's keep going. How do you feel about those moments, by the way, guys? Would you have preferred me to edit them out? Some games let me edit things like that out really easily and it seems seamless. Sometimes it doesn't and it makes it look like there's a weird cut and it looks like I'm hiding something. Again, you know, coming back to that conversation we had earlier, editing is one of those things that if you're honest with it, it's okay. But if you're doing splicing, if you're doing these things where you've, like, for instance, if you're playing on a different difficulty and you're editing it all together in some kind of ridiculous taxidermy of a challenge run, like, what's the point? Just tell people that it's segmented and that you've cut it together. It's not difficult, you know? And I don't think it cheapens it either, guys. Do you find this video cheaper because I've told you that it's segmented? Because I've told you that it's a bunch of fights edited together? Does that make you feel like this is less fun to watch? Or are you having a good time? I hope you're having a good time, you know? If you're not, maybe my channel's not going to be for you. But it's so interesting that somebody would just say, like, oh, it's wrong, you know? I don't like it like that. That's cheating. And it's really fascinating when you look at the origins of speedrunning, because I have it on good authority that speedrunning used to all be segmented. Back in the good old days, segmented was the standard. That's what everybody did. But then single segment took over, became king, and there's a lot of stigma towards segmented now. People look at it as not as impressive and not as cool and not as legitimate. And it's funny that to me, because I'm not a speedrunner and I never will be. And additionally, I've always done segmented runs. You know, I don't do like crazy permadeath stuff. It's not my bag. Look how long this is though. See how many dudes are here? It'd be interesting if Spiderman had a move like Prototype. Remember in Prototype where you could just kind of hold 2 buttons and you bust and all those tentacles came out of you and you killed every single thing in like a 5-meter radius and it looked awesome? Prototype was a cool game, dude. I feel like Prototype's one of those games that we could have got a remaster of and it would have really benefited because it came out at a time where technology was good but it was still in that interesting transition towards being better. But instead, guys, we get Horizon Zero Dawn, or whatever that one they've announced is. That's cool, isn't it? You know, a game from like 4 years ago that looked amazing when it came out? We're going to remaster that for some reason. I don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to sell it you for more money and hope that you pay for it. And do you know what I don't understand about that, other than it's fucking stupid and it makes no sense? Horizon Zero Dawn is a series that is released twice in the way of considerably more popular games. This is a game that is, everybody who plays it seems to like it, everybody says it's really good in several ways, yet nobody fucking talks about it because they release it next to massive games that swallow it. Like, why the fuck would you go up against Elden Ring? Are you high? And speaking about high, we have the final boss, Dr. Octavius. And I've got a really cool loop for this fight, guys. And you're about to watch it. And the idea is, you want to get an executable on this dude, then you want to web him till you run out of all your web, then you want to dodge the projectiles, throw 2 of them back at him, and you'll get the guaranteed stun. Just then, I fucked it up because I got stuck running up against a piece of the geometry, but instead I used my ability. And my ability is a takedown. Then when I web him, he will immediately be takedownable again. And then when I come out of this, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to fly away, he's going to throw rocks at us, I'm going to web him, I'm going to throw the first one, then I'm going to throw the second one, and then I'm going to get the Y prompt. And this is a 100% lockdown strategy if he throws things at you when you recover. So jump away, fire the web, if he throws shit at you, it's for free. Didn't do it that time, so it's not a lockdown. But in that moment, you want to save your combo, and you want to go in and do the combo on him, but he's running away now for the second phase. This part, be very careful. Do not throw the cover at him too soon, or he'll hit you with another one. And all you do, hit him with one cover, then press Y, and then you have to do the whole thing again. And we're going to do the same thing, guys. We're going to web him, we're going to wait for him to throw his fire, then we're going to... Look at that, dude. I jumped in that fire and it didn't take damage. I got really lucky then. And then we're going to throw both of them to get the Y, then we're going to go in with the Y, attack him, and then as soon as he breaks the sequence, we're going to use the BY prompt. So web, 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 fly away, throw the second one, and then throw the third one. And then Y again. See this? Perfect. There's nothing he can do. You don't need any abilities to do this, and it's absolutely devastating. And the moment he does the wrong thing, or you do the wrong thing, you can just use your ability that you've got stored up to bully him. I've got 2 takedowns now if I need them. So I could literally just stand next to him here and just take him down immediately. But he's giving me everything I need right now. The problem is my positioning and touching that wall threw off the pattern, so I'm going to execute him here. Boom. Like that. Only thing that gets in your way is Spider-Man's proclivity to touch every fucking surface like a dickhead. And then just keep doing it until you get your cutscene and you've won. I practiced this fight with the trainer just to see what it was like. And the one-hit kill trainer doesn't work on this guy. When you shoot him with the one-hit kill, he just continues as normal. But what ends up happening is you can break the game. You can hit him and do the first phase where he transitions up for him going to the building. But instead of coming down for the second phase, it stores the information that you've killed him, and it immediately puts you to that point where you pull the thing out of his neck. So it's really, really weird. But I thought that was fascinating, because I was trying to see if there was a better way of killing him, and a faster way of killing him, and the only way I could really do it was with the trainer, and even then it wasn't quick enough. Because this boss is really long and really lame, and I think it's the worst boss in the game. But now you just have to beat him up in this cinematic moment. The game slows down every time you have to dodge. And that's pretty much all you really need to do. And that was it, guys. That was Spider-Man. I had a really good time making this. It's a super fun game. But all the criticisms I've fired at it, I still feel could have easily been avoided by some quality of life changes. And because this game has been released multiple times now, I don't really hear the excuses. I don't think you can say, you know, it's just this or it's just that. I think at some point you have to start holding these developers accountable. Why would they not want us to be able to replay this game? It's a wonderful game. Why would they want to waste our time instead of letting us play it? To me, it's inexcusable. Gaming is too contested right now with a million things to do. There's too many games are being released. You know, we can argue the quality of them till the cows come home, but fundamentally, every game is vying for your attention. Why would you pick this over something that lets you play it? And unless you're a massive Spider-Man fan, I think we can agree that those interims where you're not doing anything, that is enough time for an average player to turn your game off and do something else. And in this era of video games and these battle passes and these microtransactions and this carrot on a stick, the moment you give them an opportunity to get away from the carrot, you've lost them. But thank you for watching, guys, and you take care now.